He looked at me the way you look at a stain on an expensive tablecloth. Something to be removed, something beneath notice. Alexander Wolf stood in the center of that gilded room, surrounded by investors and aristocrats and old money that smelled like champagne and contempt. And he spoke to me in Swedish. Not modern Swedish, not the kind you learn from apps or weekend courses. He used the formal, archaic dialect of 19th century nobility, the language of royal decrees and ancient law, and he used it to order me around like a servant. Fetch this, move there, know your place. He smiled while he did it. That confident, cruel smile of a man who believes he is the smartest person in every room he enters. He was so certain I would not understand, so certain I would stand there, mute and humiliated, while his international guests chuckled at the ignorant American woman who did not belong in their world. He was wrong. I let the silence stretch. I did not apologize, I did not explain, I did not flinch. And then I answered him. In flawless Old Swedish. In the language of medieval legal texts and Viking sagas. I corrected his grammar, I fixed his pronunciation. I quoted a 14th century trade agreement that made his little performance look like a child playing dress-up. The room went dead silent, 70 people holding their breath, and Alexander Wolf's face turned the color of old ash. But let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you how I ended up standing in that room, wearing a dress my mother picked out, being ordered around by my sister's billionaire fiancé. And why, when I finally spoke, I made sure it would be the last time anyone underestimated me. My name is Emily Carter. I am 29 years old, and for most of my life I have been invisible. The evening of my sister's engagement party, I stood in my Brooklyn apartment, staring at my reflection in a mirror that needed cleaning. The woman staring back was not ugly. She was not beautiful either. She was simply forgettable. Brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. Minimal makeup from the drugstore down the street. A navy blue dress that my mother had picked out during a phone call 2 weeks earlier. Nothing that draws attention, Emily. This is Megan's night. The dress was modest, appropriate, designed to help me blend into the background, which of course was exactly where everyone expected me to be. I adjusted the collar and tried to remember the last time I had chosen my own outfit for a family event. The answer was probably never. My apartment was small but clean, books everywhere, stacks of academic journals on the coffee table, piled on the kitchen counter, lining the walls in cheap particle board shelves. Most of them were in languages the average person could not read. Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, Old Norse. The languages of my former life. The life I had walked away from 3 years ago and tried very hard not to think about. On my desk, half hidden beneath a stack of translation work that paid my rent, sat a photograph I rarely looked at anymore. A younger version of me, standing in front of a Gothic stone building, snow falling around her, grinning like someone who believed the world was full of possibility. Uppsala University. Sweden. The place where I had been someone. The place where I had almost become the person I was meant to be. I turned away from the photograph and finished getting ready. Tonight was not about me. Tonight was never about me. My phone rang at 6:15. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. Emily, are you almost ready? My mother's voice was bright and sharp, the tone she used when she was nervous and trying to hide it. The car service will be there in 20 minutes. I'm ready, Mom. Good, good. A pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering her next set of instructions. Now, remember what we talked about. Don't be late, but don't arrive before the Wolves do. It would look presumptuous. I remember. And don't talk about your work. Nobody wants to hear about old languages and dead civilizations. It makes people uncomfortable. I bit the inside of my cheek. I know. And don't drink too much. I know you don't usually, but events like this, the champagne flows, and I just don't want you to embarrass yourself. Mom, I'm not going to embarrass myself. Of course not. Of course. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had softened into something that almost resembled warmth. "Your sister is so nervous, Emily. This is the biggest night of her life. Alexander's family is very particular about appearances." I noticed she did not ask if I was nervous. She did not ask how I was feeling about watching my younger sister become engaged to a billionaire while I lived in a 400-square-foot apartment translating technical documents for grocery money. But then she never asked those questions. "The Wolfs are being so generous," my mother continued. "They're paying for everything. The party, the wedding, even—" She stopped abruptly. "Even what, Mom?" "Nothing. It's nothing. Just be there on time. And Emily?" Her voice tightened. "Try to be happy for your sister. She deserves this." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there for a long moment, phone in hand, staring at nothing. She deserves this. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Megan deserved happiness, success, a fairy tale ending. And me? I was just supposed to watch from the sidelines and be grateful I was invited at all. I set the phone down and walked to my bedroom, where an old photograph sat on the nightstand. Megan and me as children, maybe 8 and 5 years old, arms wrapped around each other, laughing at something our father had said. We had been so close then, inseparable. I was the quiet one who read too many books, and Megan was the golden child who lit up every room she entered. But we had loved each other fiercely, protectively, the way sisters do. When had that changed? I could not pinpoint the exact moment. It happened slowly, then all at once. Megan learned early that being pretty opened doors. I learned that being smart did not matter if no one was listening. By high school, we lived in different worlds. By college, we barely spoke. And then, 3 years ago, everything shattered completely. I closed my eyes, and the memory surfaced whether I wanted it or not. February in Uppsala. Snow falling outside my tiny apartment window. I was 6 months into my doctoral research, happier than I had ever been, finally becoming the scholar I had always dreamed of being. My advisor had just nominated me for the Geneva Fellowship, full funding for 5 years, the opportunity of a lifetime. And then Megan called. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Mom is sick, really sick. I can't handle this alone. Please, Emily, please come home." I did not hesitate. I booked a flight that night. I left everything behind, my research, my fellowship, my future. I told my advisor I had a family emergency and withdrew from the program before he could talk me out of it. I did not even say goodbye to my colleagues, to the libraries I loved, to the life I had built. Megan needed me. That was enough. I came home to find my mother sick with pneumonia. Serious, but treatable. Not the emergency Megan had made it sound like. But by then it was too late. My position had been filled. My fellowship had been given to someone else. My life in Sweden had closed behind me like a door I could never reopen. 3 months later, my mother recovered. Megan recovered. And I stayed, picking up the pieces of a life I had never planned to live. Freelance translation work, a cramped apartment, the slow, grinding erasure of everything I had once been. I never asked Megan why she had panicked so badly, why she could not have handled a few weeks without me, why my sacrifice had been necessary. Some questions, I learned, were better left unasked. I put the photograph down and opened my laptop. If I was going to survive tonight, I needed to know what I was walking into. I typed Alexander Wolf into the search bar and watched the results populate. Forbes profiles, Bloomberg interviews, society page photographs. The man my sister was about to marry was 34 years old, heir to Wolf Capital, net worth estimated in the billions. He was known for hostile takeovers, aggressive negotiations, and what business journalists called visionary leadership. Every photograph showed the same face, handsome in a cold, calculated way. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that looked like they were calculating your value before you finished shaking his hand. I scrolled through interviews, looking for something beneath the polished surface. "Success is about dominance," he had told one reporter. "If you are not winning, you are losing." Another article mentioned a lawsuit from a former assistant. Settled out of court. Records sealed. A financial blog whispered about SEC inquiries into his Nordic acquisitions, but nothing had been proven. I clicked on a photograph of Alexander and Megan together at some charity gala. She was smiling, radiant in a red gown that probably cost more than my annual rent. But her eyes were wrong, tight, performed. The smile of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror. "What are you getting into, Meg?" But it was not my place to ask. Megan had made that clear years ago. At 6:45, I gathered my things. Phone, lipstick, a small notebook I always carried, filled with linguistic notes and fragments of translation. I checked my reflection one last time. Acceptable. Unremarkable. Exactly what everyone expected. The Uber arrived at 6:50. I climbed in and watched Brooklyn blur past the window as we headed toward Manhattan. The driver made small talk. I responded in monosyllables. My mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, preparing defenses, building walls. Just get through tonight, I told myself. Smile, nod, stay invisible. Then go home and forget this ever happened. But something felt different. A tension in my chest I could not name. A sense that tonight would not go according to plan. My phone buzzed just as we crossed the bridge into Manhattan. A text message from a number I did not recognize. 6 words that made my breath catch. "Be careful tonight. He is not what he seems." I stared at the screen. No name, no context. Just a warning, clear and cold. I should have shown someone, should have asked questions, should have turned around and gone home. Instead, I deleted the text and slipped my phone back into my purse. But the words stayed with me, burning in the back of my mind, as the car pulled up to the Sterling Club and my sister's engagement party began. The Sterling Club had no sign, no logo, no indication that it existed at all except for a single brass number above a heavy oak door and a doorman in a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The building was old limestone, the kind of old that whispered generations of wealth, the kind that did not need to announce itself because everyone who mattered already knew. I stepped out of the car and smoothed my dress, suddenly aware of how cheap the fabric felt against my skin. The doorman watched me approach with the polite, distant expression of someone trained to assess net worth at a glance. Whatever number he calculated, it clearly fell short. "Good evening," I said, offering my invitation. "Emily Carter. I'm here for the Wolf engagement party." He took the invitation, examined it carefully, then examined me with equal scrutiny. His eyes traveled from my simple heels to my drugstore makeup to the modest clutch I carried. Something flickered across his face. Not quite contempt, more like confusion. As if the invitation and the woman holding it did not match. "One moment, please." He stepped aside and spoke quietly into an earpiece. I stood on the sidewalk, alone, while a couple in matching designer outfits glided past me into the building without stopping. Then another couple. Then a silver-haired man who nodded at the doorman like an old friend and disappeared inside without a word. No one asked them to wait. No one questioned whether they belonged. A woman appeared beside the doorman, clipboard in hand, tailored black dress, eyes like polished stones, hard and assessing. "Miss Carter?" "Yes." "May I see some identification?" I handed over my driver's license. She studied it, compared it to something on her clipboard, then looked at me again. The inspection was thorough, clinical. She noted my dress, my shoes, my lack of jewelry, my everything, and found it all wanting. "You may enter," she said finally, handing back my license. "The Carter family table is on the left side of the main hall. Please enjoy the evening." No welcome, no warmth, just permission to exist in their space. I walked through the heavy doors, and as they closed behind me, I heard the woman murmur something to the doorman. The words were soft, but they carried. "That's the sister. The other one. The other one." I filed the phrase away in the part of my mind where I kept all the small wounds, the paper cuts of a lifetime of being second best. Then I lifted my chin and stepped into the party. The Sterling Club's main hall was designed to make ordinary people feel small. Soaring ceilings crowned with crystal chandeliers that scattered light like frozen rain. walls lined with oil paintings of ancestors who had been dead for centuries, but still managed to look disapproving. The air smelled of orchids and expensive perfume and something else, something sharp and metallic that I eventually recognized as ambition. A jazz quartet played in the corner, their music soft and unobtrusive, designed to fill silence without demanding attention. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd like ghosts, offering champagne from silver trays, disappearing before anyone had to acknowledge their existence. And the guests. God, the guests. 70 people, maybe 80, all dressed in fabrics that whispered wealth. Women in gowns that cost more than cars. Men in suits tailored so precisely they looked like second skins. Everyone moved with a certain ease, the particular comfort of people who had never worried about a bill, never checked a price tag, never wondered if they could afford to exist in a space like this. I stood at the edge of the room and realized I was the only person here who had ever worried about any of those things. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. I took a glass just to have something to hold, something to do with my hands besides betray how out of place I felt. The champagne was cold and expensive and tasted like nothing I could afford. I moved through the crowd, and the crowd moved around me. No one made eye contact. No one introduced themselves. I was wearing the wrong dress, the wrong shoes, the wrong face. I was furniture, wallpaper. Exactly what everyone expected me to be. I found my assigned table near the back of the room, close to the service entrance. Table 12. The farthest point from the head table where Alexander and Megan would sit. The placement was deliberate, I knew. A message written in seating charts. You are here because you must be. You are not here because you matter. 2 chairs. Both empty. My mother had not arrived yet. I sat down alone and watched the party unfold around me, invisible in the shadows. I saw them before they saw me. Richard and Clarissa Wolfe, holding court near the bar like royalty greeting subjects. Richard was tall and silver-haired, with the rigid posture of a man who had spent his life expecting obedience. He was 62 years old, founder of Wolfe Capital before passing the company to his son, and his face looked like it had been carved from granite, hard, unyielding. He spoke to a cluster of men in low tones, and they leaned in, nodding eagerly, desperate for his approval. He did not smile. He did not need to. Power was its own expression. Clarissa stood beside him, blonde and preserved, draped in emeralds that caught the light every time she moved. She looked like she had been born holding a champagne flute. Her smile was perfect and completely empty, the smile of a woman who had learned long ago that warmth was weakness and sentiment was for people who could not afford better armor. I watched them for a moment, cataloging, assessing. These were the people my sister was marrying into. These were the people who would become her family. Then Clarissa's gaze swept the room and landed on me. The look was slow, deliberate. She examined me from my hair to my shoes, cataloging every flaw, every inadequacy, every way I failed to measure up to the standards of her world. Then she whispered something to Richard. He glanced in my direction, dismissed me with a flicker of his eyes, and turned back to his conversation. I had been weighed. I had been found wanting. And the judgment had taken less than 5 seconds. Clarissa raised her champagne glass in my direction. A mock toast. The kind of gesture that looks polite from a distance but feels like a knife up close. I did not react. I had practice at not reacting. I found Megan across the room, surrounded by guests, smiling and laughing and playing the role of the perfect bride-to-be. She was radiant. There was no other word for it. Ivory gown that hugged her figure. Hair swept up in an elegant twist. Diamonds at her throat that caught the light and threw it back in fragments. She looked like she belonged here, in this world of chandeliers and champagne and casual cruelty. She looked like she had been born for this. But I knew my sister. I knew the difference between her real laugh and her performed one. And the sound coming from her now was performance, pure and practiced and hollow. She saw me watching and excused herself from the group. Her smile stayed fixed as she crossed the room, but her eyes told a different story. Tight, strained, the eyes of someone holding something together by sheer force of will. "You came," she said when she reached me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I said I would. I'm here." We stood there, sisters separated by more than the 3 feet between us. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to ask if she was okay. I wanted to tell her she did not have to do this, any of this, that there were other paths, other choices, other lives. Instead, I said nothing. Because Megan had made it clear years ago that my opinions were not welcome, that my concerns were not needed, that the best thing I could do for her was stay out of her way. "Emily," her voice dropped, barely above a whisper, "I need you to do something for me tonight." "Anything." She hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward something across the room, someone I could not see. "Just stay in the background, okay? Don't draw attention. Alexander, he gets particular about things." "Particular how?" Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Just a crack, barely visible, but I saw it. I knew her too well not to see it. Just trust me, please." Before I could respond, her gaze shifted over my shoulder. Her entire body changed, shoulders back, chin up, smile brighter, like a puppet whose strings had suddenly been pulled tight. She squeezed my hand, too hard, too desperate, the squeeze of someone drowning who had just spotted a piece of driftwood. "I have to go, we'll talk later." And then she was gone, swallowed back into the crowd, back to the performance, back to whoever had made her spine straighten with fear. I watched her go and felt something cold settle in my stomach. That squeeze. I knew that squeeze. It was the same one she had given me 3 years ago, right before the phone call that brought me home from Sweden. Something was very wrong. I scanned the room, trying to understand the dynamics I was swimming in. And that was when I noticed the international guests. A cluster of men and women near the windows, dressed expensively but simply, observing more than participating. European, I guessed from their bearing. Scandinavian, probably. They had the reserved manner of people from northern climates, the habit of watching and waiting rather than speaking first. Among them, one man stood out. He was older, late 60s, with silver hair and a posture that spoke of quiet authority. His suit was well made but understated, no flash, no show. While everyone else in the room performed, he simply watched, studied, calculated. His eyes swept the room and landed on me for a moment. Not the dismissive glance of Richard Wolfe or the contemptuous assessment of Clarissa. Something different. Curiosity, maybe. Recognition of something he had not expected to find. I looked away first, unsettled. I did not know who he was, but I had the strange feeling that he knew something about me that I had not yet figured out myself. My mother arrived 15 minutes late, flustered and apologizing to people who were not listening. She wore a new dress, nicer than anything I had seen in her closet, and jewelry I did not recognize. Gifts from the Wolfes, or purchases made on credit she could not afford. She spotted me at table 12 and made her way over, her smile too bright, her movements too quick. "Emily, thank God you're sitting down. I was worried you'd be wandering around bothering people." "Hello to you too, Mom." She sat down across from me, immediately scanning the room for Megan. "Doesn't your sister look beautiful? Clarissa helped her pick the dress." "She looks tired." My mother's face hardened. "She looks happy. Don't ruin this." I bit back the response I wanted to give. What would be the point? My mother had made her choice about which daughter mattered long before tonight. "The Wolfes are being so generous," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We should be grateful. They're giving Megan everything." "Grateful for what, exactly?" Her eyes flickered. Something shifted in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or shame. For giving Megan a future. For giving us all a future. The words were meant to close the conversation. Instead, they opened a door I had not known existed. What future? What exactly had the Wolfes promised? And what had my mother traded to secure it? "Just smile, Emily. That's all you have to do tonight. Smile and be grateful." I needed air. I needed space. I needed to get away from the champagne and the chandeliers, and the weight of expectations I had never agreed to carry. I excused myself and walked toward the service corridor, away from the party, away from the glitter. The hallway was quieter here. Staff members moved with purpose, carrying trays, adjusting arrangements, invisible to the guests they served. I stopped near a doorway, pretending to check my phone, and that was when I heard them. Two servers, huddled together, speaking in hushed voices. "Did you hear? He fired 3 people this week." "3? What for?" One made eye contact too long, one mispronounced his name, and the third... A pause. She said no when he told her to stay late. Jesus, the fiancé? Who else? The whole family's terrified of him, even the bride. Even the bride. I stood frozen in that hallway, the words echoing in my mind. I thought about Megan's tight smile, the desperate squeeze of her hand, the way her body had changed the moment she sensed someone watching. This was not a love story. This was something else entirely. The lights in the main hall dimmed. A spotlight hit the marble staircase. Someone was about to make an entrance. I returned to the party just as a hush fell over the crowd. Every head turned toward the stairs. Every conversation stopped, and Alexander Wolf descended into the room like a king claiming his throne. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of build that came from personal trainers and discipline and the luxury of time. His suit was navy, bespoke, tailored so precisely to his body that it looked like it had been sewn directly onto his skin. Dark hair swept back from a forehead that had never known worry, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes the color of frozen steel, scanning the room not with interest but with ownership. Alexander Wolf did not walk down those stairs. He descended, each step deliberate, measured, designed to make everyone watch. And everyone did watch. The room had gone silent, not with anticipation but with something closer to obedience, the trained silence of subjects awaiting their ruler. He paused halfway down, letting the moment stretch, letting the spotlight linger, letting everyone absorb his presence. His smile was perfect and completely empty. The smile of a man who had learned early that charm was a weapon and wielded it accordingly. I stood at the edge of the room, invisible in the shadows, and studied him the way I studied ancient texts, looking for meaning beneath the surface, looking for the truth behind the performance. He was handsome, I could not deny that. Handsome in the way a predator is handsome. Beautiful and dangerous and utterly without mercy. The kind of face that graced magazine covers and haunted the nightmares of competitors. The kind of face that made promises it never intended to keep. He reached the bottom of the stairs and found Megan waiting for him. She stood perfectly still, smile radiant, posture flawless. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing it with theatrical precision. The gesture was not affection, it was possession. He was not greeting his fiancée, he was claiming her. The room erupted in polite applause. Megan's smile never wavered, neither did the tension in her shoulders. I watched Alexander work the crowd, moving from group to group with practiced ease. He shook hands with investors, he laughed with old money, he charmed the wives and intimidated the husbands and left everyone feeling like they had been granted an audience with someone important. The performance was flawless, seamless, the work of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of making people feel small while convincing them they should be grateful for the privilege. And then his eyes found me. It was brief. 2 seconds, maybe 3. His gaze swept the room like a searchlight and stopped on my corner, on my modest dress and my drugstore makeup and my everything that did not belong. Something flickered in his expression. Not curiosity, not interest, assessment. He was cataloging me, filing me away, determining my place in the hierarchy of his world. I held his gaze. I did not look away. I did not smile. His lips curved slightly, amused by something I could not see. Then he turned back to his guests and continued his parade through the room, pulling Megan along beside him like an accessory. I had been identified, catalogued, marked. and I had the distinct feeling that the evening was about to get much worse. They came to my table 20 minutes later, Alexander and Megan making the rounds, greeting the lesser guests now that the important people had been properly acknowledged. My mother straightened in her seat as they approached, smoothing her dress, arranging her smile, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Mrs. Carter." Alexander's voice was warm honey poured over broken glass. "What a pleasure to finally meet Megan's mother properly." He took my mother's hand and held it a beat too long. She practically melted under his attention, her smile widening until it threatened to split her face. "Oh, Mr. Wolf, Alexander, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for this beautiful party. Please." He released her hand with obvious reluctance, as if parting with something precious. "You're family now. Or you will be." The word family sounded like a contract, not a bond, an acquisition. Then he turned to me. He did not extend his hand. He did not step closer. He simply looked at me the way one examines a piece of furniture that does not match the decor. His eyes traveled from my face to my dress to my shoes and back again, cataloging every inadequacy, every way I failed to meet the standards of his world. "And you must be Emily." His voice was pleasant, his eyes were not. The older sister. Not the sister, the older sister. The one left behind while the younger one succeeded. The implication was clear and deliberateness was cruel. "That's right," I said. My voice was steady, polite, giving him nothing. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you." He tilted his head, studying me with exaggerated interest. "Megan's told me so much about you." "Well?" A pause, perfectly timed. "Some things. You're a researcher, is that right? Linguistics or something?" "Comparative linguistics, historical language structures." His eyebrows rose in mock fascination. "Fascinating. And there's money in that?" My mother jumped in before I could respond. "Emily's still finding her path. We're very proud of her." The word proud sounded hollow, defensive, a shield raised against an attack that had already landed. Alexander's smile widened. "Of course you are." He looked at me a moment longer, savoring something I could not see. Then he turned to Megan, dismissing me completely. "Darling, we should continue making the rounds. The Hendersons are waiting." Megan nodded, her smile fixed in place. But as she turned to follow him, her eyes met mine for just a moment. The look was pleading, desperate. "Don't, please don't." I watched them walk away and felt the first stirrings of something hot and dangerous in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to recognition. I had seen men like Alexander Wolf before, had studied them in texts about power dynamics and linguistic dominance. But reading about a wolf and standing in front of one were very different things. The first order came 10 minutes later. Alexander appeared at our table again, Megan trailing behind him. He did not sit down. He simply stood there, looking at the bar, then at me, then back at the bar. "Emily, would you mind terribly getting Megan a glass of champagne? The servers here are so slow, and she's been on her feet all evening." It was phrased as a request. It was delivered as a command. My mother nodded eagerly before I could respond. "Of course she will. Emily doesn't mind, do you, honey?" I looked at Alexander. His smile was pleasant, patient, waiting. He wanted me to bristle. He wanted to see me struggle against the bit he was placing in my mouth. He wanted proof that his power was working. I would not give him that satisfaction. Not yet. "Of course," I said, rising from my seat. "Any preference on the vintage?" Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. He had expected resistance. He had expected to win easily. Instead, I was playing the game better than he anticipated. "Dealer's choice," he said. "I'm sure you'll manage." I walked to the bar, feeling his eyes on my back the entire way. The bartender was a woman about my age, tired around the edges, the kind of tired that comes from serving people who never see you. "Tough crowd tonight?" she asked as she poured 2 glasses of champagne. "You have no idea." I returned to the table and handed one glass to Megan. She accepted it with a small, grateful smile that did not reach her eyes. Alexander took the other glass from my hand, the one I had intended for myself. He did not ask. He simply took it, sipped, made a face. "A bit warm," he said. "But I suppose it's the thought that counts." He walked away without another word, pulling Megan with him. My mother leaned across the table, her voice an urgent whisper. "That went well. He seems to like you." I said nothing. My jaw ached from clenching. As Alexander walked away, I heard him murmur something to Megan. The words were soft, but they carried across the quiet table. "Your sister's quite the servant. We should keep her around for the wedding." Richard Wolfe found me 15 minutes later. I had barely sat down when he appeared, settling into the chair across from me without asking permission. He held a whiskey, swirling it slowly, not drinking. His presence was heavy, deliberate, the presence of a man accustomed to taking whatever space he wanted. "So," he said, "you're the academic one." "That's one way to put it." "Alexander mentioned you study dead languages." His voice was flat, assessing. "Seems like a waste of a sharp mind." "The past has a way of explaining the present." His eyes narrowed. Most people did not answer him back. Most people stammered and deflected and sought his approval. I was doing none of those things, and he did not know what to make of it. "What's your angle here, Emily?" "Excuse me?" "Everyone has an angle. Your mother wants security. Your sister wants status." He leaned forward, his gaze pinning me in place. "What do you want from my son?" I met his eyes without flinching. "Nothing. I'm here for my sister's engagement party, that's all." He studied me for a long moment, searching for the lie. Finally, he leaned back, something like respect flickering across his granite face. "I don't believe you, but I respect the answer." He stood, finished his whiskey in one swallow, and looked down at me with an expression that was almost a warning. "A word of advice. Don't get in Alexander's way tonight. He has important business and he doesn't tolerate distractions." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me with more questions than answers. Important business. At an engagement party. I filed the information away and watched him cross the room to join a cluster of guests near the window. The Scandinavian delegation. The silver-haired man I had noticed earlier. Richard's posture changed as he approached them. Aggressive, eager, trying too hard. The silver-haired man listened politely, nodded occasionally, and gave away nothing. Whatever Richard wanted from him, he was not getting it easily. Who was that man? And why did Richard Wolfe, who seemed to fear nothing, seem so desperate to impress him? The formal dinner began an hour into the party. Guests found their assigned seats. Conversations settled into the comfortable rhythm of wealth discussing wealth, and Alexander rose to deliver a toast. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate the most important night of my life." He stood at the head table, champagne raised, spotlight finding him like an old friend. Megan sat beside him, perfect and still, a beautiful statue. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge my future family." He gestured toward our table. Megan's wonderful mother, Patricia, who raised 2 daughters on her own after her husband's passing. Polite applause. My mother beamed. And her older sister, Emily. A pause. The pause was deliberate, theatrical, designed to create space for what came next. Emily is still finding herself, but we're hopeful marriage will inspire her too. Scattered laughter, some uncomfortable, some genuine, all cutting. I felt 70 pairs of eyes turn toward me, the quiet amusement of people who enjoyed watching someone lesser squirm. Clarissa raised her glass from across the room. "To inspiration," she said. More laughter, louder now. Permission had been granted. I did not smile. I did not flinch. I raised my own glass, took a small sip, and set it down. My face was stone. My silence was louder than any response. Across the room I caught the silver-haired man watching me. He was the only person not laughing. His expression was unreadable, but he gave the slightest shake of his head. Not disappointment. Something else. Recognition, maybe, or warning. Alexander finished his toast and sat down, satisfied with his performance. He had drawn blood. First blood. And he expected me to retreat, to nurse my wounds, to accept my place in the hierarchy he had established. He did not know me at all. I excused myself from the table and walked toward the service corridor, seeking air, seeking space, and that was when I heard it. Alexander's voice, sharp with tension, speaking into his phone. "I don't care what he said. The Lindbergh deal closes tonight." I stopped near the corner, pretending to examine a painting. His words carried clearly. "Then make him see reason. 200 million is on the table. If we lose this because of some old man's principles, heads will roll." A pause, someone arguing on the other end. "No, I'll handle Lindbergh myself. Just make sure the documents are ready." He ended the call, jaw tight, and turned back toward the party. His eyes found me near the corridor entrance. For a moment his mask slipped, suspicion, calculation, threat. Then the smile returned. He walked toward me, each step deliberate. "Emily," he said, voice silk over steel. "Enjoying the party? You seem to be everywhere tonight." I kept my expression neutral, gave him nothing to work with. "It's a party," I said. "People move around." Alexander stepped closer, invading my space the way men like him always do. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. Close enough that backing away would look like retreat. "People move around, yes." His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. "But you specifically seem drawn to private conversations, near service corridors, near phone calls." The accusation hung between us. He knew I had been listening, or he suspected. Either way, he was testing me, probing for weakness, looking for the crack he could exploit. "I was looking for the restroom," I said. "A server pointed me this direction." "Did they?" "They did." I held his gaze without flinching. "I'm not particularly interested in your business calls, Alexander. I'm a linguist, not a spy." The word linguist drew a flicker of something across his face. Disdain, maybe, dismissal. Right. Dead languages. His smile sharpened. Hard to spy with those. "You'd be surprised what the dead can tell us." For a moment something shifted in his expression. Uncertainty, perhaps. The unsettling realization that I was not reacting the way he expected. Then the mask returned, smooth and impenetrable. "Enjoy the rest of the party, Emily. Try to stay out of trouble." He walked away without waiting for a response, rejoining a cluster of investors near the bar. I exhaled slowly, unclenching fists I had not realized I was making. My hands were trembling, my face betrayed nothing. Close call. He was watching me now. I needed to be more careful. But even as I thought it, my attention was caught by something across the room. Alexander had found Megan. His hand reached for her, fingers closing around her wrist. Not her hand, her wrist. The grip was tight, possessive. Megan's smile did not falter, but her body stiffened almost imperceptibly. I had seen that grip before, in textbooks, in case studies, in the quiet testimonies of women who had survived things they should never have had to survive. I spent the next 30 minutes watching them, not obviously. I moved through the party, accepted a fresh glass of champagne I did not drink, exchanged pleasantries with guests who looked through me. But my eyes kept returning to Alexander and Megan, tracking their movements, cataloging the patterns I was beginning to see. At first glance, they were the perfect couple. Beautiful, radiant, the kind of pair that graced society pages and inspired envy. But I had spent my life studying language, and body language was just another dialect. What I saw beneath the performance made my stomach turn. Alexander positioned Megan with a hand on her lower back, guiding, steering, controlling. When she laughed too loudly at a joke, his fingers pressed harder into her spine, and she quieted immediately. When she started to express an opinion, he interrupted smoothly to clarify what she meant, translating her words into something more acceptable. He controlled who she talked to, a subtle redirection here, a gentle pull there, moving her away from certain guests and toward others. When a young man complimented her dress with a little too much enthusiasm, Alexander stepped between them, ending the conversation with a cold smile and a proprietary arm around her waist. I watched him lean in to whisper something in her ear. Megan's face flickered, fear or shame crossing her features before she adjusted her posture. Later, another whisper. She changed how she was holding her champagne glass. Another whisper. She excused herself from a conversation she had seemed to be enjoying. Each correction was invisible to casual observers. The kind of thing you could explain away if you wanted to. He is just attentive. He is just protective. He just wants what is best for her. But I saw them. All of them. The constant, relentless micro-adjustments. The training of a woman who was slowly forgetting how to exist without permission. This was not love. This was not even partnership. This was control so thorough it had become invisible, woven into every interaction, every gesture, every breath. And Megan, my brilliant, vibrant, stubborn little sister. She was disappearing inside it, becoming a performance of a person instead of a real one. I had to talk to her, alone. The opportunity came 20 minutes later when Megan excused herself to the restroom. I waited 30 seconds, then followed. The ladies' room was marble and mirrors, soft lighting and the smell of expensive hand soap. Megan stood at the sink, staring at her reflection. Her mask was down. Without an audience, she looked exhausted, hollowed out. A woman running on empty. "Meg!" She startled, saw me in the mirror, and the mask slammed back into place. Smile bright, posture perfect. "Emily, are you having a good time? The food is amazing, isn't it?" "We need to talk." Her smile tightened. "About what?" "Everything's fine." "No." I stepped closer. "It's not." Silence stretched between us. In the mirror, I watched her reflection war with itself. The performance versus the truth. The lie versus the breaking. "I've been watching you all night," I said. "Watching him." "Watching what?" Her voice went sharp, defensive. "A man who loves me? A man who controls you." The words came out harder than I intended. He corrects how you stand, how you laugh, who you talk to. He tells you what to say and how to say it. That's not love, Megan. That's ownership. He's protective. There's a difference. There's really not. Her hands gripped the marble counter. Her knuckles went white. "You don't understand." Her voice dropped, cold and cutting. "You've never understood." "Then help me understand. What happened to you? When did you become this?" "Nothing happened to me." She whirled to face me, eyes blazing. "I fell in love with a successful man. I'm getting everything I ever wanted. The life, the security, the future. Everything you could never give me." "I'm not talking about money, Meg. I'm talking about the way you flinch when he looks at you, the way you perform instead of exist. The way you're so afraid of making a mistake that you've forgotten how to be a real person." Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment I thought I had reached her. Then her face hardened. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous." The accusation landed like a slap. "I'm not jealous, I'm scared. For you." She laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "Scared? I'm fine. I'm better than fine. I'm about to marry a billionaire. What are you about to do, Emily? Publish another paper no one will read? Translate another document that nobody cares about?" The words were designed to wound. They did. "If you ever need me," I said quietly, "I'm here, no matter what." Megan turned back to the mirror, adjusting her hair with trembling fingers. "I don't need you. I never did." She walked out without another word, leaving me alone with the marble and the mirrors and the terrible truth settling into my bones. I leaned against the counter and let the memory come. 3 years ago. Uppsala, Sweden, the happiest time of my life. I was 6 months into my doctoral research, studying medieval Scandinavian legal texts, spending my days in libraries that smelled of old paper, and my nights in a tiny apartment overlooking snow-covered streets. My advisor, Professor Eriksson, had called me one of the most promising scholars in a generation. I had just been nominated for the Geneva Fellowship, the most prestigious research grant in my field. 5 years of full funding. The opportunity of a lifetime. I was becoming the person I had always been meant to be. And then Megan called. It was February, snow falling outside my window. A perfect, quiet evening. I was reviewing a 14th century manuscript when my phone rang. Megan's number. I answered expecting gossip, sister talk, the usual. Instead, I heard sobbing, hysterical, gasping sobs that made my blood run cold. "Emily, I need you. Please, please come home." "What happened? Meg, talk to me. I can't do this alone. Mom is sick, really sick, and I can't handle it. Please." I did not hesitate. Not for a second. I booked a flight that night. Packed one bag, left everything else behind. I emailed my advisor, told him I had a family emergency and needed to withdraw from the program. I did not wait for his response. I did not say goodbye to my research, my colleagues, the future I had worked so hard to build. Megan needed me. That was enough. I came home to find my mother sick with pneumonia. Serious, but treatable. Not the emergency Megan had made it sound like. But by then, it was too late. My position had been filled. My fellowship had been given to someone else. My life in Sweden had closed behind me like a door that would never reopen. 3 months later, my mother recovered. Megan was fine. And I stayed, trapped in a life I had never planned, picking up the pieces of someone I used to be. Standing in that bathroom now, I let myself wonder for the first time. Did Megan really need me that badly? Or did she just not want to handle things alone? Was my sacrifice necessary? Or was it simply convenient? And then another memory surfaced, one I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten it. The week after I came home, Megan went to a party, met a charming businessman, started dating him within a month. His name was Alexander Wolf. I found my mother at the bar, slightly tipsy, talking to a woman I did not recognize. I pulled her aside, steering her to a quiet corner where no one could overhear. "Mom, what's really going on? Why is this wedding so important?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean? Megan's happy. Isn't that enough?" "Is she? Or is she trapped?" My mother's face went pale. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. "You don't understand the situation," she whispered. "Then explain it to me." A long silence. She stared at her drink like it contained answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "After your father died, I made some bad decisions. Investments that didn't pan out, credit cards I couldn't pay off." "How bad?" 200,000, maybe more. She swallowed. The shop was about to go under. We were going to lose the house. Everything. The number hung in the air between us. Impossible. Devastating. And Alexander? My mother would not meet my eyes. He helped, quietly. He paid off the debts, saved the business, saved everything. And in exchange, Megan marries him. It's not like that. They love each other. Do they? Or does Megan feel like she can't say no? Like she owes him? Like we all owe him? My mother's silence was answer enough. "He owns you," I said slowly, the truth crystallizing with terrible clarity. "He owns all of you, and Megan is the payment." My mother's eyes filled with tears. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You just didn't like the other options. She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. "Please don't ruin this. If Alexander pulls out now, we lose everything. The house, the shop, everything. Megan knows what she's doing. She agreed to this." I pulled away from her grasp and walked toward the windows, needing distance, needing air. My mind was spinning. The debt, the control, the trap. Megan had not just fallen in love with a billionaire, she had been sold to one. And my mother, our mother, had brokered the deal. I thought about the 3 years I had sacrificed, the fellowship I had abandoned, the future I had surrendered for a family that had never valued me. I had given up everything for them, and they had sold my sister to pay off credit card debt. Something shifted inside me, something cold and clear and certain. I could walk away, get through tonight, go home and pretend none of this was my problem. That was what they expected, what they wanted, but Megan was my sister, my baby sister. The girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she was afraid of the lightning. The girl who had held my hand at our father's funeral because she knew I would not cry in front of anyone else. I would not let her drown in a golden cage, not without a fight. I turned back toward the party and found Henrik Lindberg standing a few feet away, watching me with quiet intensity. "You have the look of someone who has just learned an unpleasant truth," he said in lightly accented English. He offered me a glass of water. I took it without thinking. I find that truth, however unpleasant, is always better than comfortable lies. His eyes held mine for a moment, filled with something I could not quite read. Then he nodded once and walked away, rejoining the Scandinavian delegation. His words stayed with me. And so did the question. What did he know that I did not? The party transitioned from cocktails to formal dinner with the smooth precision of old money ritual. Guests moved toward their assigned tables in a choreographed dance of status, each placement a statement about where they stood in the hierarchy of Alexander Wolf's world. I found my seat at table 12, tucked into the far corner of the room, close enough to the kitchen entrance that I could hear the clatter of dishes and the urgent whispers of servers. The message was clear. I had been seated as far from the head table as architecturally possible. My mother, I noticed, was at table 3, much closer to the Wolfs. Even she outranked me tonight. From my position in the margins, I had a perfect sightline to the center of the room. Alexander and Megan sat at the head table like royalty, flanked by Richard and Clarissa on one side and the silver-haired Scandinavian on the other. Henrik Lindberg, I had learned his name was, chairman of the Nordic Investment Trust, the man Alexander desperately needed to impress. I noticed something interesting about the seating arrangement. Lindberg had been placed next to Megan, not Alexander. A deliberate choice, perhaps, to showcase the beautiful fiancé. But Alexander kept glancing at the older man, seeking approval that never seemed to come. Lindberg's expression remained politely neutral, giving away nothing. My tablemates were a motley collection of afterthoughts. A young couple, the husband some kind of junior associate at a firm I did not recognize, his wife nervous and overdressed, an elderly aunt whom no one had spoken to all evening, and one empty chair that seemed to emphasize how little anyone wanted to be at this table. The junior associate leaned toward his wife and whispered something. His voice carried more than he intended. "That's the sister. The unsuccessful one." I pretended not to hear. I was becoming skilled at that. The empty chair beside me was suddenly occupied. A woman slid into it with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to late entrances. Late 30s, sharp eyes, a designer suit that whispered power rather than screamed it. "You must be Emily," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Chen. I work with the Wolfs. Mind if I join you?" Her smile was warm, but I sensed calculation beneath it. Lawyers always had that quality, and everything about her said lawyer. The precise handshake, the assessing gaze, the way she positioned herself to observe the entire room while appearing focused on me. "Please," I said. "It seems you already have." She laughed, a genuine sound that surprised me. "Fair point. I'm not great at asking permission. Occupational hazard." A waiter appeared, and Victoria ordered wine with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and expected to receive it. Then she turned her attention back to me, her gaze thoughtful. "So, you're the linguist. Megan mentioned you. Said you were the smart one in the family." I blinked. "Megan said that?" "She talks about you more than you might think. Always Emily would know this, or Emily studied that." Victoria shrugged. "I think she admires you." The words did not match Megan's coldness in the bathroom. But then, people rarely showed the same face to everyone. "Sisters are complicated," I said carefully. "Aren't they?" Victoria's eyes flickered to the head table, where Alexander was leaning close to Megan, whispering something that made her smile tighten. "Can I give you some advice? Unsolicited but well-intentioned." "I'm listening." Her voice dropped. Alexander doesn't like being outshone, especially not by family members who aren't useful to him. And you're telling me this because? Victoria's gaze met mine, something unreadable in her expression. Because I've seen what happens to people who embarrass him, and I'd rather not see it happen to you. The warning was specific enough to be meaningful, vague enough to be deniable. I filed it away alongside everything else I was learning about Alexander Wolf. You work for the Wolfs, I said. Why warn me? Victoria smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Let's just say not everyone who works for a family agrees with everything that family does. She turned to her menu, conversation closed. But before the silence could settle, she added something that made my pulse quicken. By the way, the Swedish gentleman, Lindberg, he asked about you earlier. Wanted to know if you'd studied in Scandinavia. I stared at her. How would he know to ask that? Victoria shrugged. No idea, but he seemed very interested in the answer. The formal toasts began before I could process what she had told me. Dinner service paused, and Alexander rose from his seat, champagne glass in hand. The room fell silent with trained obedience. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the most important night of my life. His voice carried easily, warm and confident, the voice of a man accustomed to commanding attention. He pulled Megan close, his arm around her waist like a claim of ownership. I'm the luckiest man alive to have found a woman like Megan. She's everything I ever wanted. Beautiful, graceful, perfect in every way. I listened to him describe my sister, noting what he praised. Her beauty, her grace, her perfection. Not once did he mention her intelligence, her dreams, her independence. Every compliment was about what she gave him, what she added to his image, what she contributed to his brand. She makes me look good. She understands my needs. She knows her role. Megan sat beside him, smiling, nodding, a beautiful accessory to his performance. Of course, I must thank her family for raising such a remarkable woman. Alexander gestured toward our section of the room. Her wonderful mother, Patricia, whose strength and sacrifice have been an inspiration to us all. My mother beamed, not hearing the condescension beneath the praise. Then Alexander's eyes found me. The pause that followed was theatrical, deliberate, a silence designed to sharpen whatever blade came next. And to Emily, Megan's older sister. The room waited. I could feel the weight of attention shifting toward my corner. Emily is unique. His smile widened. While most of us were building careers, she was studying ancient languages, dead ones, I believe. Scattered laughter. The permission to mock had been granted. But that's the beauty of family, isn't it? We don't choose them. We just accept them. More laughter, louder now. The words landed exactly as he intended them to. Emily Carter, the burden, the failure, the embarrassing relative that successful families learn to tolerate. To Emily, he raised his glass. May you find your path someday. We're all rooting for you. The room lifted their glasses. They were toasting to my inadequacy, to my invisibility, to the comfortable assumption that I was exactly what Alexander said I was. I raised my own glass, took a small sip, set it down without expression. My silence was the only dignity I had left. I would not waste it on these people. Across the room, I noticed Henrik Lindberg was the only person not drinking the toast. He watched Alexander with an expression I recognized from academic conferences, the look of someone evaluating a colleague and finding them severely wanting. Dinner resumed, but Alexander was not finished with me. He appeared at table 12 15 minutes later, sliding into the chair Victoria had vacated. She had excused herself moments earlier, disappearing into the crowd with a meaningful glance in my direction. Emily. Alexander's smile was predatory. I hope you're enjoying the evening. The lobster is flown in from Maine. It's delicious, thank you. Good, good. He leaned back, studying me with exaggerated interest. I realized I never properly got to know my future sister-in-law. We should fix that." His voice was loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. I understood immediately. This was a performance. Whatever came next was designed for an audience. "So, Emily," he steepled his fingers, "you study languages. Tell me, what's your opinion on the current state of EU trade negotiations?" The question was a trap. Either I did not know, proving I was out of touch, or I did know, and he could belittle my opinion. There was no winning answer. I chose careful truth. The tariff disputes have created interesting pressures, particularly in Nordic markets. His eyebrow rose. He had expected ignorance. "Is that so?" "It is. The language barriers in cross-border contracts have become a significant issue. Standardization efforts have helped, but there's still considerable friction." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then annoyance quickly masked. "And the Lindbergh acquisition protocols? Any thoughts on Nordic corporate governance?" I recognized the second trap. He was testing whether I knew anything about his deal with Henrik. I played dumb. "I'm afraid corporate law isn't my specialty. I study historical texts, not modern contracts." Alexander smirked. "Of course. Hard to make money from medieval poetry. Hard to make meaning from balance sheets." The smile froze on his face. A few guests at nearby tables exchanged glances. I had answered back. That was not supposed to happen. "You're very careful with your words," he said slowly. "I'm a linguist. Words are all I have." He studied me for a long moment, trying to find the crack, the weakness, the angle he could exploit. Finding none, he rose from his seat. "There's more to you than Megan mentioned. I'll have to keep a closer eye on you." It was meant as a compliment. It sounded like a threat. He paused before walking away. "One more question. Do you speak any living languages, Emily? Or just the dead ones?" His tone was casual. His eyes were calculating. He was planning something. "A few," I said. "Nothing impressive." He nodded slowly, filed the information away, and returned to his table. I watched him go and felt the weight of what was coming settle onto my shoulders. Henrik Lindbergh appeared at my table 10 minutes later. He moved quietly for a man of his age, arriving beside my chair before I noticed his approach. He held a champagne glass loosely, more prop than beverage. "May I?" He gestured to the empty seat. "Please." He sat with the ease of someone who had occupied boardrooms and palaces and never felt out of place in either. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but without the cruelty I had seen in Alexander's gaze. "That was quite a performance," he said. "His or mine?" A ghost of a smile. "Both, actually, but I was referring to his. He enjoys making people feel small. It's a curious trait in someone who wants to be seen as large." I said nothing. I was not sure if this was a test. "You studied in Scandinavia," Lindbergh continued. It was not a question. "Uppsala, yes?" My heart stuttered. "How did you know that?" "I make it my business to know things, especially about people who interest me." "I'm not sure why I would interest you." Lindbergh's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something beyond polite neutrality. Respect, perhaps. Recognition. "Because you answered Alexander's questions correctly, but you pretended not to know as much as you do. That kind of strategic humility is rare." He paused. "And valuable." He switched languages without warning. Swedish, casual and conversational, a question about the university and my time there. I hesitated. If I answered fluently, I revealed myself. If I pretended ignorance, I lied to a man who clearly already knew the truth. I chose the middle path. "My Swedish is rusty. It's been 3 years." Lindbergh nodded slowly. 3 years. Uppsala, the linguistics program. You left suddenly." His voice softened. "I remember hearing about it." "You remember hearing about a student who dropped out?" "I remember hearing about a student who was going to change the field. And then she vanished." The words hit me like a physical blow. Someone had noticed. Someone had remembered. After 3 years of invisibility, someone had actually seen what I had lost. Lindbergh rose from his seat. "We should talk more, Emily Carter. But not here, not with so many ears." He placed something on the table. A business card, simple and elegant, cream-colored stock, black typography. "If you ever want to finish what you started, call me." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me with a card that felt heavier than paper should. I looked at it. Henrik Lindbergh, Chairman, Nordic Investment Trust. Below the printed text, handwritten in precise script, 2 words that made my throat tight. Uppsala remembers. I slipped the card into my purse just as Alexander's voice cut across the room. "Henrik, we should discuss the final terms." Lindbergh did not turn around. He simply raised one hand in a dismissive wave and kept walking toward the Scandinavian delegation. Alexander's face flushed red. For the first time all evening, I saw something crack in his perfect composure. He had been dismissed, publicly, by the man he needed most. His eyes swept the room, searching for the cause, and landed on me. The calculation in his gaze sharpened into something darker. Megan appeared beside my table, breathless and urgent. "What did you say to Lindbergh?" "Nothing. He came to me." "Alexander is furious. He thinks you're sabotaging the deal." "I don't even know what the deal is." Megan grabbed my wrist, her grip tight with desperation. "It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what he believes. Please, Emily, just stay invisible for the rest of the night." She was gone before I could respond, pulled back into Alexander's orbit by invisible strings. I watched her go and felt the atmosphere shift around me. Alexander stood near the head table, speaking to his father in low, urgent tones. Richard's face was grim. Both of them kept glancing in my direction. A decision had been made. I could feel it in the air like the pressure before a storm. Alexander raised his glass, calling for attention. The room quieted. "Before dessert, I thought we might have some entertainment." His eyes found mine across the crowd. The smile on his face was sharp and hungry. "I've been so impressed by my future sister-in-law's linguistic talents. Perhaps she'd indulge us with a demonstration." The trap was set. The room turned to look at me, and I realized with sudden, crystalline clarity that this was the moment I had been waiting for. Not to hide, not to deflect, but to show them exactly who I was. The room shifted its attention to me like a spotlight finding its target. 70 pairs of eyes, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips, conversations dying mid-sentence. Alexander stood at the center of the room, ringmaster of his own circus, smiling the smile of a man who had already won. "I hope everyone is enjoying the evening," he continued, his voice warm and carrying. "But I thought we might add some intellectual stimulation to the proceedings." He gestured toward me with an expansive wave. "My future sister-in-law, Emily, is a linguist. She studies dead languages, ancient texts, medieval poetry, that sort of thing." A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. The setup was working. He was framing the narrative before I could speak a word. "Now, I've always believed that language is the mark of true sophistication. Don't you agree, Henrik?" He turned toward Lindbergh, seeking validation. The older man offered nothing but a neutral nod, giving Alexander no ammunition and no support. Alexander pressed on, undeterred. "I myself studied Swedish during my time in Stockholm. 3 months of intensive immersion. Quite rigorous." He said this with pride, as if 3 months made him an expert, as if a summer program could match years of dedicated study. "So I thought, why not test our resident linguist? See if her academic training holds up against real-world fluency." The framing was clever. He had positioned himself as the practical businessman, me as the ivory tower dreamer. The man of action versus the woman of useless knowledge. Nothing serious, of course. His smile sharpened. Just a bit of fun. But I saw the truth in his eyes. This was not fun. This was not entertainment. This was execution. Richard Wolfe leaned forward in his seat, smirking with anticipation. Clarissa adjusted her emeralds, settling in to watch the show. Only Lindbergh remained impassive, his expression unreadable, watching Alexander with something that might have been disappointment. Or might have been curiosity about what would happen next. Alexander cleared his throat and shifted his posture, assuming the role of cultured polyglot. When he spoke again, it was in Swedish. Kan du vara snäll och hämta mig ett glas vatten? Jag är säker på att du förstår enkla instruktioner. Could you please fetch me a glass of water? I'm sure you understand simple instructions. The Swedish was technically correct but stiff. Textbook phrases delivered with exaggerated precision. To anyone who did not speak the language, it probably sounded impressive. Sophisticated. The words of a man who had truly mastered a foreign tongue. To me, it sounded like a first-year student reading from a phrase book. His pronunciation was off. The tonal accent, that distinctive rise and fall that separated native speakers from tourists, was completely wrong. He stressed the words like an American, flat and heavy, missing the musicality that gave Swedish its character. But none of that mattered to the audience. They did not speak Swedish. They only saw what Alexander wanted them to see. A brilliant man demonstrating his worldly education. A linguist being tested and surely about to fail. Guests exchanged impressed glances. A few laughed nervously, unsure of the rules of this new game. My mother looked confused, lost in a language she could not parse. Megan's face was frozen, pale as fresh snow, her champagne glass trembling almost imperceptibly in her hand. Alexander watched me, waiting for the flinch. The confusion. The humiliation of a woman who could not understand what was being said to her. I gave him nothing. I stood perfectly still, my expression neutral, as if he had commented on the weather. The silence stretched between us. 1 second, 2, 3. His smile flickered. This was not the response he had anticipated. He turned to the audience with a practiced laugh. As I suspected. My future sister-in-law is charming but quite limited. She wouldn't understand a word. The laughter came easier now, louder, emboldened by his confidence. They had been given permission to enjoy this. Permission to watch someone lesser squirm. I remained silent, waiting, watching. Let him dig his grave deeper. Alexander's confidence swelled with what he perceived as victory. His posture loosened, his smile widened, and his Swedish shifted from stiff formality to open contempt. Hon är verkligen patetisk, eller hur? Den misslyckade systern som ingen bryr sig om. She is truly pathetic, isn't she? The failed sister nobody cares about. He glanced at the Scandinavian delegation, seeking their approval. A few of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They understood every word. They knew exactly what he was doing. But they said nothing. Perhaps they wanted to see how this would play out. Perhaps they were curious what the quiet woman in the modest dress would do. Alexander moved closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the cruelty dancing in his eyes. He spoke directly to my face, each Swedish word dripping with poison. Du borde veta din plats. Du är ingenting. En börda för din familj. You should know your place. You are nothing. A burden to your family. His smile was victorious, triumphant. He was enjoying this, enjoying the performance of dominance, enjoying the imagined spectacle of a woman being broken by words she could not understand. My jaw tightened, but I did not respond. My silence read as defeat to most of the room. The poor, ignorant woman, unable to comprehend the sophisticated European phrases being thrown at her. Only I knew the truth. Only I knew that every word was landing, not as intended wounds, but as fuel for the fire building inside me. Alexander turned to his international guests, switching between English and Swedish with theatrical flair. You see, this is the difference between education and intelligence. Anyone can study. But true sophistication? That's bred, not learned. He laughed at his own joke. Richard Wolfe raised his glass in approval. Clarissa's smile was razor-thin with satisfaction. Then Alexander delivered what he believed was the killing blow. He leaned close to me, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, and spoke in Swedish with deliberate, mocking precision. Om hon hade någon värdighet skulle hon gå nu. Men hon kommer att stanna, för hon är beroende av sin systers framgång, som en parasit. If she had any dignity, she would leave now. But she will stay, because she depends on her sister's success. Like a parasite. The word parasite hung in the air like a blade. I felt it land. Not as a wound, but as a key turning in a lock. He had given me everything I needed. Across the room, Henrik Lindberg's expression had shifted. The Scandinavian delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. One woman near Lindberg shook her head slightly, disgust barely concealed beneath diplomatic composure. They had understood every word. They knew exactly what Alexander Wolf was, and they were watching to see what would happen next. Alexander did not notice. He was too busy basking in his imagined triumph, too intoxicated by the sound of his own cruelty to see the gathering storm. Megan caught my eye from across the room. Her face was a mask of horror. She did not speak Swedish, but she could read the cruelty in Alexander's tone, the venom in his smile, the pleasure he took in public humiliation. For the first time all evening, she looked like she wanted to run. The room divided itself into factions without a word being spoken. Richard and Clarissa Wolf sat in their positions of power, practically glowing with satisfaction. Their son, the Alpha, was putting the nobody in her place. They had already written me off, already dismissed the entire Carter family as acceptable losses. This engagement had never been about love. It had always been about acquisition. My mother sat frozen at her table, sensing something terrible was happening but unable to understand the language of my destruction. Her eyes darted between Alexander and me, searching for context, finding none. She did not try to intervene. Perhaps she could not. Perhaps she simply chose not to. Megan stood near the head table, trembling visibly now. Alexander's hand found her wrist again, that possessive grip I had noticed all evening. He squeezed and she stilled. The message was clear. Stay. Smile. This is none of your concern. She obeyed. Something in her eyes cracked, but she obeyed. And then there was Lindberg. The old man had not moved, had not spoken, had not betrayed any reaction beyond that initial flash of disgust. But his eyes had never left me. He was watching me the way a chess master watches a promising player, not with pity, not with sympathy, but with anticipation. He knew something was about to happen. He was waiting to see what. Near the back of the room, I caught sight of Victoria Chen. The lawyer was watching everything with sharp, calculating eyes. Her hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her pocket. Recording? Documenting? I could not be sure. But I knew one thing with sudden clarity. Whatever happened next, there would be witnesses who remembered the truth. Time stretched in that moment of silence. I stood in the center of Alexander Wolf's world, surrounded by wealth and contempt and the crushing weight of 70 judgments. His words echoed in my mind, each insult a stone added to a pile that was supposed to bury me. Patadisk, mislicked, parasite, pathetic, failed, parasite. I could stay silent, accept the humiliation, walk out with whatever dignity remained and never look back. That was what they expected, what they wanted, the invisible sister, finally proving she deserved her invisibility. But I thought of Megan's trembling hands, of my mother's complicity, of the 3 years I had lost, the fellowship I had surrendered, the life I had sacrificed for a family that had never valued me. I thought of Uppsala, of Professor Erickson and the medieval texts and the snow falling outside my tiny apartment window, of the person I had been before that phone call shattered everything. I thought of who I wanted to be when this night was over, and I made my choice. A strange peace settled over me. The fear drained away. The doubt evaporated. What remained was clarity, crystal, cold, absolute. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I had known all night. I had just been waiting for the right moment. This was the right moment. I drew a slow, deliberate breath. I straightened my spine, assuming the posture I had learned in lecture halls and academic conferences. The posture of a scholar, not a servant. I looked at Alexander. Really looked at him. Past the expensive suit and the polished smile and the billions in his bank account. I saw what he was. A man so terrified of inadequacy that he needed to destroy anyone who revealed it. And then I let him see me. Not the invisible sister. Not the failed academic. Not the woman he had been trying to break for the last 3 hours. The real Emily Carter. Something shifted in the air. Alexander sensed it. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickering behind his eyes. The room sensed it. Conversations that had resumed died away again. Attention sharpened. Even my mother straightened in her seat, some maternal instinct warning her that everything was about to change. I opened my mouth, and I spoke, in Swedish. Not the textbook Swedish Alexander had used, not the halting phrases of a tourist or the memorized sentences of a summer immersion program. Old Swedish, academic Swedish, the precise, formal language of medieval legal documents and royal proclamations, the Swedish that scholars spent years mastering and native speakers studied in university courses. Det var ett intressant val av ord, Herr Wolf. That was an interesting choice of words, Mr. Wolf. My accent was Uppsala perfect. My grammar was flawless. My pronunciation carried the tonal musicality that Alexander's had completely lacked. The effect was immediate. Alexander's face went slack, the color drained from his cheeks like water from a broken vessel. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. He understood enough to know what had just happened. He understood that I had heard every word, every insult, every command, every cruelty he had believed was hidden behind a foreign language, and he understood that I was about to respond. Gasps rippled through the Scandinavian delegation. Henrik Lindberg's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Richard Wolff's triumphant expression curdled into confusion. Clarissa's champagne glass tilted dangerously. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She did not understand the words, but she understood the shift. She understood that her invisible daughter had just become the most visible person in the room. And Megan. My sister stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. Recognition. Realization. The dawning understanding that the woman she had taken for granted her entire life was someone she had never truly known. I took a step forward, closing the distance between myself and Alexander. My voice remained calm, measured, each word a blade wrapped in velvet. Du föreläste mig om sofistikering. Låt mig då visa dig vad verklig språkkunskap innebär. You lectured me about sophistication. Then let me show you what true linguistic mastery means. Alexander stumbled backward. A physical retreat from my words. The predator suddenly faced with something he had not expected, something he could not control. The room was frozen, suspended. 70 people holding their breath, waiting for whatever came next. I paused, letting the silence build, letting the weight of the moment press down on Alexander's shoulders, letting him understand that his humiliation was only beginning. And then, in a voice that carried to every corner of that gilded room, I delivered the first real blow. Du sa att jag inte förstod ett ord. Tillåt mig att korrigera dig. På 3 språk om du föredrar. You said I wouldn't understand a word. Allow me to correct you. In 3 languages, if you prefer. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all night. It was terrifying. I began with his grammar. Du använde fel verbform, I said, my Swedish flowing like water over stones. Förstår i detta sammanhang kräver konjunktiv. En form du uppenbarligen aldrig lärde dig. You used the wrong verb form. Understand in this context requires the subjunctive, a form you clearly never learned. The correction was surgical, precise, delivered without emotion, without anger, without any of the venom he had poured into his own words. I was not attacking him. I was educating him. And that was infinitely worse. Alexander's jaw tightened. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an anchor, finding none. He was trying to process what was happening, trying to keep up with words that moved faster than his 3 months of intensive immersion had prepared him for. I continued, shifting to his pronunciation. Och din tonaccent är helt fel. Du betonar orden som en amerikan som läst en frasbok på flygplanet. And your tonal accent is completely wrong. You stress the words like an American who read a phrasebook on the airplane. A ripple of sound moved through the Scandinavian delegation. Not quite laughter, something between recognition and vindication. The sound of people who had been forced to listen politely to Alexander's mangled Swedish all evening, and were finally hearing it named for what it was. Henrik Lindberg's eyebrows rose slightly. Not amusement, respect. The acknowledgement of expertise, recognizing expertise. Alexander's face cycled through colors. Red with embarrassment, white with shock. Then a mottled purple as the humiliation began to sink beneath his skin. But I was not finished. Du kallade mig parasit, I said, letting the word hang in the air between us. Et intressant ordval. You called me parasite. An interesting word choice. I paused, gathering the threads of knowledge I had spent years weaving together. This was the moment, the deep cut. I formsvenska juridiska texter användes det ordet för att beskriva adelsmän som levde på böndernas arbete. Män som tog utan att ge, som konsumerade utan att producera, som trodde att deras börd gav dem rätt att förakta dem som faktiskt byggde samhället. In old Swedish legal texts, that word was used to describe noblemen who lived off the labor of peasants, men who took without giving, who consumed without producing, who believed their birth entitled them to despise those who actually built society. I let the historical reference land, let the irony sink its teeth into him. Ironiskt, eller hur? Ironic, isn't it? Alexander had no response. He could not respond. He did not even understand the full depth of what I had said. But the Scandinavians did. They understood perfectly. And from their expressions, they appreciated the precision of the blade I had just slipped between his ribs. One of the Swedish delegates leaned toward another and whispered something. I caught the word Uppsala. They were connecting the dots. They were beginning to understand who they were really looking at. I did not announce my credentials. I did not need to. I simply demonstrated them. Om du verkligen vill diskutera språklig sofistikering, I continued, shifting into a more complex register, using constructions that no summer immersion course would ever teach. Låt oss tala om äldre Västgötalagen, den äldsta bevarade lagtexten på svenska. Jag tillbringade 2 år med att studera dess semantiska strukturer. If you truly wish to discuss linguistic sophistication, let us speak of the older Västgöta law, the oldest preserved legal text in Swedish. I spent 2 years studying its semantic structures. The reference was deeply academic, specialized, the kind of knowledge that took years of dedicated study to acquire, the kind that could not be faked or memorized from YouTube videos. Alexander's confusion was complete now. He was catching perhaps half of what I said, if that. His tutors had not prepared him for this. His intensive course had not covered medieval legal terminology. He was a tourist in a language I had made my home. The room was shifting around us. The non-Swedish speakers did not understand my words, but they understood the transformation they were witnessing. My posture had changed. My voice carried authority it had not possessed before. I was no longer the invisible sister, the failed academic, the woman Alexander had tried to humiliate into submission. I was a scholar, and I was teaching a very public lesson. Even my mother, who understood nothing of what I was saying, saw the change. Her eyes were wide, her hand still pressed against her mouth. She was watching her invisible daughter become visible in a way she had never imagined possible. I switched to English, allowing the entire room to hear what came next. I studied at Uppsala University, Department of Scandinavian Languages. My specialty was medieval linguistic evolution and legal terminology. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. I left 3 years ago, not because I failed. I paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. Because my family needed me. My eyes found Megan across the room. My sister, my baby sister. The girl I had sacrificed everything for. Some of us make sacrifices. Megan's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, cutting channels through her carefully applied makeup. For the first time, she was seeing the full cost of the phone call that had brought me home, the future I had surrendered. The life I had given up so she would not have to face our mother's illness alone. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, the silence of a room recalculating everything it had assumed about the woman standing at its center. Alexander's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. He looked like a man who had reached for a sword and found himself holding air. I turned back to him. You said I wouldn't understand a word. You offered 3 languages if I preferred. My smile returned, calm, controlled, devastating. Let me take you up on that offer. I addressed him first in Swedish, formal and precise, each word chosen with academic care. På svenska, du är en man som förväxlar rikedom med värde och arrogans med intelligens. In Swedish, you are a man who confuses wealth with worth and arrogance with intelligence. Alexander flinched but held his ground. Pride kept him standing even as everything else crumbled around him. I shifted to Norwegian, demonstrating the breadth of my expertise across the Nordic linguistic family. The language flowed differently, the cadence changed, but my fluency remained unbroken. På norsk, du trodde du kunne ydmyge mig fordi du ikke vidste hvem jeg var. Det var din første fejl. In Norwegian, you thought you could humiliate me because you did not know who I was. That was your first mistake. The Norwegian delegates leaned forward. She spoke their language too. The woman Alexander had dismissed as limited, as ignorant, as a burden, commanded their mother tongue with effortless precision. Finally, I delivered the killing stroke in Danish. Each word deliberate. Each syllable weighted with meaning. På dansk, din anden fejl var at antage, at tavshed betyder svaghed. Nogle gange betyder det bare, at man venter. In Danish, your second mistake was assuming that silence means weakness. Sometimes it just means one is waiting. 3 languages, 3 condemnations, 1 message. I had not just answered Alexander Wolf. I had dismantled him in the tongues of the very people he had been trying to impress. I had proven myself not merely competent, but superior, not merely educated, but masterful. And I had done it without raising my voice, without anger, without stooping to his level. I returned to English for my final words to him. I don't need to prove my intelligence to you, Alexander. I never did. I looked at him with something that might have been pity if I had allowed myself to feel it. You just proved yours to everyone in this room. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats, the room suspended in the aftermath of what they had witnessed. Then, Henrik Lindberg rose from his seat and began to clap. The sound was slow, deliberate, each impact of palm against palm echoing through the hall like a gavel falling. This was not enthusiastic applause. It was something more powerful. It was judgment rendered, verdict delivered. Other Scandinavian delegates rose to join him. One by one, they added their hands to the rhythm. The Norwegian investors, the Danish businessmen, the Swedish bankers, all standing, all applauding, all acknowledging what had just occurred. The sound built, not into a standing ovation, but into something more meaningful, a recognition, a validation, a welcome into a world Alexander had tried to bar me from. American guests exchanged uncertain glances. The social calculus was shifting in real time. The woman they had dismissed as nobody was being honored by the most important people in the room. In this world, status was everything. And mine had just changed. Richard Wolf's face had gone gray. His son had humiliated himself in front of the man the family needed most. The deal, the evening, the carefully constructed image of Wolf excellence was crumbling before his eyes. Clarissa Wolf's champagne glass hung forgotten in her hand. Her practiced composure had finally cracked. She looked for the first time all evening like someone who did not know what to do next. And my mother. Patricia Carter sat in her chair with tears streaming down her face. But these were not tears of embarrassment or fear. She was looking at me like she was seeing a stranger, like she was realizing, far too late, that the daughter she had dismissed for years was someone extraordinary, someone she had never bothered to know. I could have destroyed him further. Standing in the center of that room, with the applause of powerful men still ringing in the air, I had everything I needed to reduce Alexander Wolf to rubble. His cruelty had been witnessed. His ignorance had been exposed. I could have listed every insult, translated every degrading word he had spoken, painted a complete picture of the small, petty man hiding behind his billions. The temptation was real. The anger was real. But I thought of my father, a quiet man who had taught me that strength was not measured by how hard you hit, but by knowing when not to swing. A man who had shown me, through a lifetime of small examples, that grace under pressure was worth more than vengeance. I thought of who I wanted to be when this night ended, and I made my choice. I didn't come here tonight to prove anything, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. I came to celebrate my sister's engagement. I looked at Alexander, meeting his shell-shocked gaze with composure. I have no interest in humiliating you, Alexander. You've done that yourself. A pause. Then, softer. I'm going to get some air. When I come back, I hope we can all remember why we're actually here. I turned and walked toward the terrace doors. Not fleeing, not retreating, choosing to exit with the dignity he had tried to strip from me. The room watched me go. There was no satisfaction in my posture, no triumph in my stride. Just a woman who had proven her worth and did not need applause to confirm it. That restraint, I would learn later, impressed the room more than any finishing blow could have. Henrik Lindberg nodded slowly as I passed, and in his eyes I saw the recognition of a decision made. Whatever he had been considering about Emily Carter, my choice to walk away with grace had settled it. I reached the terrace doors. My hand touched the cool metal of the handle. I was almost free. Then Alexander's voice cut through the silence. "Don't you dare walk away from me." The words were loud, desperate, ugly, stripped of all the polish and charm that had defined him throughout the evening. I turned back. Alexander was striding toward me, finger pointing like a weapon. His face was contorted with rage, the mask completely shattered now, revealing the petulant, wounded creature beneath. "You think you can embarrass me in my own party and just leave?" He stopped a few feet away, chest heaving, eyes wild with something that looked almost like panic. "You planned this. You came here to sabotage me." The accusation was irrational, wild, the desperate flailing of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. He turned to the room, seeking allies he no longer had. "Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to ruin the Lindbergh deal." His voice rose, cracking at the edges. She probably researched everything, memorized phrases to make herself look smart. He was grasping now, spinning narrative from thin air, trying to rewrite what everyone had just witnessed. This isn't about language, this is corporate espionage. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Accusations like that carried weight in this world. Even false ones could cause damage. Richard Wolf stepped forward, placing himself beside his son, backing the narrative. Alexander raises a valid point. How did she know about the Nordic connections? Clarissa joined the formation. She was lurking near private conversations all evening. I noticed it myself. The story was being constructed in real time. Emily Carter, not the wronged party, but the infiltrator. Not the victim, but the spy. The Scandinavians exchanged glances. They knew the truth. But would they speak? Would they risk the political complications of contradicting a powerful family in their own territory? Alexander smelled blood. His confidence began to return, fed by his parents' support and the uncertainty rippling through the crowd. "I want her removed," he announced. "Security, escort Ms. Carter out immediately." He turned to me, triumph returning to his eyes. "And someone call my lawyers. We're going to get to the bottom of this." His voice dropped, cold and hard and full of promise. "You think speaking a few languages makes you special? I will bury you. I will make sure no university, no institution, no one ever takes you seriously again." The threat hung in the air, real and dangerous. Security guards appeared at the edges of the room, awaiting their orders. My mother sat frozen in terror. Megan stood paralyzed between her fiancé and her sister. And I stood alone, facing a billionaire's fury with nothing but the truth on my side. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Clear, calm, absolute. "Mr. Wolf." Henrik Lindberg had not sat back down after his applause. He stood near the head table, his posture relaxed, his expression carved from Arctic ice. "I think you should stop talking now." Alexander wheeled toward him. "Henrik, I told you, this is a family." "I know exactly what this is," Lindberg interrupted. His voice was soft but carried the weight of empires. "And I know exactly who she is." He began walking toward the center of the room, each step measured and deliberate. "Which is more than I can say for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. His eyes found mine for just a moment, and I saw something there that looked almost like respect. Then he turned to face Alexander Wolf. "Before you destroy this woman, Mr. Wolf, perhaps you should know who you're actually dealing with." He unfolded the paper with the careful precision of a man about to deliver a verdict. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Emily Carter, my former research assistant at Uppsala, co-author of the Lindbergh Protocol on Nordic Trade Language Standards, and the reason half the contracts your company uses are legally enforceable in Scandinavian markets." The words landed like a bomb in the center of the room. Co-author of the Lindbergh Protocol. The reason half the contracts your company uses are legally enforceable in Scandinavian markets. I watched Alexander's face as the meaning penetrated his rage. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something like fear flicker behind his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by desperate defiance. "That's impossible," he said, his voice cracking at the edges. "She's a waitress, a nobody. She couldn't possibly—" "She was never a waitress, Mr. Wolf." Lindbergh's voice was calm, patient, the voice of a man explaining something obvious to a slow child. "She was a doctoral candidate at one of the finest linguistics programs in Europe. She left that program to care for her family, a sacrifice you clearly cannot comprehend." He held up the document in his hand. "This is a faculty recommendation letter from Uppsala University. It describes Miss Carter as one of the most promising scholars in a generation. It recommends her for the Geneva Fellowship, the most prestigious research grant in her field." Alexander shook his head violently. "Anyone can forge a letter. Anyone can claim credentials they don't have." "I received this letter personally," Lindbergh continued, unmoved by the interruption. "Professor Eriksson sent it to me 3 years ago when I was seeking candidates for the Nordic Cultural Foundation. I have known about Emily Carter since before you ever met her sister." The room was absolutely still. 70 people holding their breath, watching the most powerful man among them dismantle the host of the party. For one shining moment, I felt hope. It was over. Lindbergh had spoken. The truth was out. Alexander would have to accept defeat. I should have known better. Alexander's expression shifted. The fear calcified into something harder, colder, the look of a cornered animal deciding to attack rather than submit. "Henrik?" His voice changed, becoming almost reasonable, almost calm. With all due respect, this is a family matter. Whatever credentials this woman may or may not have, she came here tonight with an agenda. Lindbergh's eyes narrowed. Did she? She knew about our deal. She researched Nordic languages specifically to infiltrate this evening. Alexander spread his hands, appealing to the room. How else do you explain it? She just happens to speak Swedish? She just happens to know about trade protocols? She knows about trade protocols because she helped write them, Lindbergh said. I just explained this. So you say. Alexander's voice hardened. But I find it very convenient that your former research assistant just happens to be the sister of my fiancé. Just happens to show up at my engagement party. Just happens to know everything about the deal I'm trying to close. He turned to face the crowd, playing to his audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're witnessing something far more sinister than a simple misunderstanding. I believe Emily Carter came here tonight as a corporate spy. Gasps rippled through the American guests. The accusation was outrageous, baseless, but it was delivered with such conviction that doubt began to creep into the room. She was lurking near private conversations all evening. I caught her myself outside the service corridor while I was on a confidential business call. Alexander's finger jabbed toward me. She accessed information she had no right to access. She used her family connection to infiltrate my home, my business, my life. Richard Wolff stepped forward, lending his authority to his son's narrative. Alexander raises valid concerns. Corporate espionage is a serious matter. The timing of all this is certainly suspicious. I agree, Clarissa added, her voice dripping with false concern. I noticed her behavior all evening, always watching, always listening. Something was clearly wrong. The story was being constructed in real time. Brick by brick, they were building a wall of accusation around me. And I could see it working. The American guests, who had no loyalty to Lindbergh and every reason to curry favor with the Wolffs, were nodding along. The narrative was shifting. Alexander pressed his advantage. Let's examine the facts, he said, his voice taking on the confident cadence of a prosecutor. This woman claims she studied in Sweden. Convenient. This woman claims she worked on trade protocols. Convenient. This woman speaks the exact languages needed to understand my private business discussions. Very convenient. He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. For all we know, she memorized phrases from the internet. Con artists do it all the time. They research their targets, learn just enough to seem credible, then strike when the moment is right. Mr. Wolff, Lindbergh said, his patience visibly thinning. I am telling you that I personally know this woman's credentials. I am telling you that I have seen her academic work. Are you calling me a liar? The question hung in the air. Dangerous. Direct. Alexander hesitated. Even in his rage, he knew better than to directly insult the man he needed most. But he could not back down. His pride would not allow it. I'm saying you may have been deceived, he said carefully. I'm saying that this woman is clearly clever enough to fool even intelligent people. She fooled my fiancé. She fooled her own mother. Why not a respected businessman who met her briefly 3 years ago? He turned to the security guards who had appeared at the edges of the room. I want her removed from this property immediately. And I want a full investigation into how she obtained access to proprietary information. His eyes found mine, blazing with triumph and hatred. You picked the wrong family to target, Emily Carter. I will bury you. I will make sure no university, no institution, no one ever takes you seriously again. By the time my lawyers are finished, you won't be able to get a job teaching kindergarten. The threat was real. He had the money to make it happen. He had the connections, the resources, the sheer vindictive will to destroy someone who had embarrassed him, and I was standing alone against all of it. Lindbergh opened his mouth to respond, but Richard Wolff cut him off. Henrik, please. Richard's voice was smooth, conciliatory, the voice of a man trying to salvage a business relationship. This is clearly a complicated situation. Why don't we discuss it privately? away from all these witnesses. I'm sure we can come to an understanding. It was a bribe wrapped in politeness, an offer to make the problem disappear if Lindbergh would just stop making things difficult. Lindbergh's expression did not change. There is nothing to discuss privately, Richard. Your son has just accused an innocent woman of crimes she did not commit, in front of dozens of witnesses. That is not something I am willing to overlook. Innocent? Alexander laughed. She humiliated me in front of my guests. She sabotaged my engagement party. She responded to your insults in the language you chose to deliver them, Lindbergh interrupted. Nothing more, nothing less. If you feel humiliated, Mr. Wolf, I suggest you examine who is truly responsible for that humiliation. The rebuke was surgical, but Alexander was beyond hearing reason now. His world was crumbling, and he needed someone to blame. Remove her, he commanded the security guards. Now. The guards hesitated, looking between Alexander and Lindbergh, unsure whose authority to obey. Touch her, Lindbergh said quietly, and I will personally ensure that every Nordic investment fund withdraws from American markets within the month. Try me. The guards froze. It was at that moment that my mother appeared at my side. I had not seen her approach. She seemed to materialize from the crowd, her face pale and streaked with mascara, her hands wringing together in that nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. Emily, she whispered urgently, please, just apologize. I stared at her. Apologize for what? It doesn't matter. Her fingers closed around my arm, nails digging in. Just say you're sorry. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say you got nervous and wanted to impress everyone. Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter what's true. Her voice cracked with desperation. Don't you understand? If you don't fix this, we lose everything. The house, the shop, everything Alexander paid for. There it was, the real fear. Not for me, not for justice, for money, for the comfortable life that Alexander's wealth had provided. He paid off our debts, Patricia continued, her grip tightening. We owe him, we owe them. If you ruin this, they'll take it all back. I looked at my mother, this woman who had raised me, who had watched me grow, who had never once seen me for who I really was. So your solution is for me to confess to crimes I didn't commit? To let him destroy my reputation so you can keep your flower shop? It's not just the shop. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It's everything, Emily. Our whole life. No, Mom. I gently removed her hand from my arm. It's your life. The life you chose when you sold Megan to a monster to pay off your credit cards. Patricia recoiled as if I had struck her. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. There's always a choice. You just didn't like the other options. My mother stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in her eyes. Then she turned and walked away. Not toward me, not to stand beside her daughter in her moment of need. She walked toward Clarissa Wolfe, and Clarissa put an arm around her, comforting, welcoming her into the fold. My mother had made her choice. She had chosen them. I stood alone in the center of the room, watching the woman who gave me life take her place among my enemies. Megan appeared between us. She stood equidistant from Alexander and me, frozen in the no-man's land between the life she had accepted and the sister she had abandoned. Her face was a battlefield. Fear and guilt and love and terror warred across her features, each gaining ground and losing it in turn. Alexander extended his hand toward her. Megan, come here. His voice was soft, but I heard the command beneath it, the expectation of obedience, the certainty that she would heel like a well-trained dog. I said nothing. I would not beg my sister to choose me. That choice had to be hers, free and clear. Megan, Alexander's voice sharpened, your sister has embarrassed me, embarrassed us, embarrassed you. She needs to understand that actions have consequences. He waited, hand still extended. Stand with your family, he said. The word family meant him. Not me, not blood, him. Megan's voice came out broken, barely audible. Alexander, maybe we can talk about this privately. There's no need for security. Emily didn't mean what? He cut her off, his patience snapping. To humiliate me in front of investors? In front of my colleagues? In front of Henrik Lindbergh? His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Choose carefully, Megan. The threat was unmistakable. Side with your sister and you lose everything too. Megan looked at me. Her eyes were full of apology, of anguish, of helplessness. I could see her struggling, fighting against the invisible chains that bound her. But she did not move toward me. She did not move toward Alexander either. She simply stayed, paralyzed, neutral, absent. And in her stillness I saw the answer. Megan would not fight for me. She never had. She never would. I understood now with perfect clarity. 3 years ago, she had called me home. I had given up everything. And tonight, when it mattered most, she could not even take a step in my direction. The grief was enormous, but so was the clarity. I was alone. I had always been alone, and maybe that was okay. Alexander smiled at Megan's silence. He had won. She had not chosen me. In his world, that was the same as choosing him. Remove her, he ordered the guards again. 2 security men moved toward me. Professional, expressionless, hands ready to grip my arms and escort me out like a criminal. The room watched, some uncomfortable, some entertained, some ashamed. Any last words? Alexander asked, savoring his victory. Before you're escorted out like the fraud you are? He wanted me to beg, to cry, to crumble. He wanted proof that he had won, that his power was absolute, that a woman with nothing could never stand against a man with everything. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Past the expensive suit and the billions in his bank account and the security guards waiting to drag me away. I saw what he was. A man so terrified of inadequacy that he needed to destroy anyone who revealed it. A man who measured his worth in other people's submission. A man who would spend his entire life chasing a sense of value he would never find. I almost felt sorry for him. I came here tonight for my sister, I said. My voice was quiet but steady. Not for you, not for your money, not for your approval. I straightened my spine and met his gaze without flinching. You insulted me in a language you assumed I couldn't understand. That was your choice. I responded in kind. That was mine. I took a breath. I have nothing to apologize for, and I have nothing to fear from you. My voice carried across the silent room. Do what you want. I will not break for your satisfaction. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the guards hesitated, uncertain. For one moment, Alexander looked almost afraid. Then his face hardened. Get her out of... Enough! The word cut through the room like a blade. Henrik Lindbergh had moved while everyone was focused on me. He stood now at the center of the floor, his posture relaxed, his expression carved from ice. That is quite enough, Mr. Wolf. Alexander whirled toward him. Henrik, I told you this is... I know exactly what this is. Lindbergh's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of continence. And I know exactly who she is, which is more than I can say for you. He reached into his jacket and withdrew another document. This one was thicker, bound, official. Before you destroy this woman, he said, perhaps you should understand what you're actually destroying. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had not expected to find. Respect. Then he turned to face the room. Allow me to explain exactly who Emily Carter is, and exactly what she has done for the very business you claim she's trying to sabotage. Lindbergh held the document where everyone could see it. The paper was thick, official, bearing the letterhead of Uppsala University and the formal stamps of European academic institutions. Even from where I stood, I could see that it was not something hastily produced or easily forged. This is a faculty recommendation letter, Lindbergh said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. Written by Professor Erik Eriksson, chair of the Department of Scandinavian Languages at Uppsala University, It is dated 3 years ago, addressed to the selection committee of the Geneva Fellowship. He paused, letting the weight of the institution settle over the crowd. Even those who had never heard of the Geneva Fellowship could sense its significance from his tone. "Allow me to read a portion." He adjusted his glasses and began to recite. Miss Carter demonstrates extraordinary aptitude in medieval Scandinavian linguistics. Her work on semantic evolution in Nordic legal texts is groundbreaking. Her analysis of the older Vestgota law has already been cited by scholars across 3 continents. He looked up at the room, then at Alexander. Groundbreaking, not adequate, not promising, groundbreaking. He continued reading. "She is, without reservation, the finest student I have supervised in 30 years. Her departure from our program would be a significant loss to the field of linguistic scholarship." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of reaction spread through the crowd, murmurs, shifting postures, the recalculation of everything they had assumed about the woman in the modest dress. I stood frozen, hearing my former life described by someone I had never met speaking about a letter I had never read. Professor Erickson had believed in me that much, had fought for me that much, and I had walked away without ever knowing. The grief of what I had lost, mixed with the unexpected validation of what I had been. My eyes stung, but I would not cry, not here, not now. Alexander's face had gone through several transformations during Lindbergh's reading: confusion, doubt, horror. Now it settled into desperate defiance. "That letter could be fabricated," he said, his voice lacking its earlier conviction. "Anyone can forge academic credentials. It doesn't prove anything." Lindbergh's eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "Fabricated? I received this letter personally, Mr. Wolf. Professor Erickson sent it to me when I inquired about promising candidates for a research position at the Nordic Cultural Foundation." He folded the letter carefully and returned it to his pocket. "I have known about Emily Carter for 3 years. I was disappointed when she withdrew from consideration. The academic world lost one of its brightest minds." His eyes found mine for a moment. "Now I understand why she left. Family obligations, sacrifice, concepts you seem unfamiliar with." Alexander shook his head, grasping for purchase on a narrative that was slipping away from him. "Fine. She was a good student. That still doesn't explain how she knew about my business dealings, how she knew about the Nordic protocols." "Ah," Lindbergh reached into his jacket again. "I was hoping you would ask about that." He produced a second document. This one was bound, thicker, more official-looking. The cover bore a title I recognized instantly, though I had not seen it in 3 years. "The Lindbergh Protocol, Standardized Language Framework for Nordic American Trade Agreements." "Do you recognize this, Mr. Wolf?" Alexander's face went pale. "That's the framework we use for our Scandinavian contracts." "Correct. Every Nordic deal your company has signed in the past 2 years relies on this protocol. The language standards, the terminology definitions, the cross-border legal interpretations, all of it flows from this document." Lindbergh opened the report to the first page. "Allow me to read the authorship credits." His voice was almost gentle now, the gentleness of a man delivering a killing blow. Primary author, Henrik Lindbergh, Nordic Investment Trust. Contributing author, Dr. Emily Carter, Uppsala University, Department of Scandinavian Languages. The room erupted, not in applause or protest, but in the chaotic murmur of 70 people suddenly realizing that everything they thought they knew was wrong. The woman Alexander had called a parasite, a fraud, a burden, had literally written the rules his company depended on. "That's impossible," Alexander whispered. But the fight had gone out of his voice. Lindbergh addressed the room at large, his tone shifting into that of a lecturer explaining something fundamental. 3 years ago, my foundation commissioned a study on linguistic barriers in international trade law. The problem was significant. Contracts written in English often lost crucial nuances when translated into Nordic languages. Legal disputes arose from simple misunderstandings of terminology. He gestured toward me. We needed someone who understood both medieval legal terminology and modern contract language. Someone who could trace the evolution of words across centuries and explain why a term that meant one thing in 14th century Swedish might mean something entirely different in 21st century Norwegian. There was only one candidate qualified for the work, Emily Carter. He let that sink in. She completed the research in 8 months, ahead of schedule, under budget. The protocol was implemented across 17 countries. It has facilitated over $4 billion in trade agreements. $4 billion. The number hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Every contract you have signed with Nordic partners uses language frameworks that Emily Carter developed, Lindberg continued, turning back to Alexander. The very deal you are trying to close with me tonight would not exist without her work. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was sharp as a blade. You called her a parasite, a fraud, a burden to her family. Each word was precise, deliberate, devastating. She is the foundation your empire stands on, and you did not even know her name. Alexander's mouth opened. No sound emerged. For the first time all evening he had no words, in any language. The room waited in stunned silence. Lindberg was not finished. "Let us examine your accusations one by one," he said, his voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "You claimed Miss Carter came here as a corporate spy, that she researched Nordic languages specifically to infiltrate this evening." He shook his head slowly. "She speaks Swedish because she lived in Sweden for 2 years, studying at one of the world's finest universities. She speaks Norwegian and Danish because those languages are part of the same linguistic family, and any serious scholar of Scandinavian linguistics masters all 3. He turned to the room. "She did not research these languages to spy on you, Mr. Wolf. She mastered them years before she ever heard your name." Alexander tried to interject, but Lindberg continued without pause. "You claimed she knew about your deal with me, that she somehow accessed confidential information." A thin smile crossed his face. "She knew nothing about our deal until tonight. I approached her. I recognized her name from the protocol she helped write. I was curious whether the brilliant scholar I had read about was the same woman your fiancé's sister turned out to be." He looked at me. "I found that she was. And I found something else as well. I found a woman who had given up everything for her family, who had sacrificed her career, her fellowship, her entire future because her sister called and said she needed help." His voice softened. "Miss Carter did not come here to sabotage you. She came here to support her sister's engagement. The only reason she is standing in this room is because she loves her family more than she loves herself." He turned back to Alexander. "Can you say the same?" The silence that followed was absolute. "You called her a fraud," Lindberg continued. "You suggested her credentials were fabricated, memorized from YouTube, I believe you said." His contempt was barely concealed now. "Miss Carter's dissertation research is cited in 14 academic journals. Her work is used by 3 Scandinavian governments. The language standards she developed are taught in universities across Europe." He stepped closer to Alexander. "She is not a fraud, Mr. Wolf. She is one of the most accomplished young linguists in her field. The only fraud in this room is the man who pretended 3 months of language classes made him an expert." The words hit like physical blows. Alexander flinched with each one. "You called her pathetic, failed, a burden to her family." Lindberg's voice went quiet, but it carried further than any shout. "Miss Carter left Uppsala at the height of her career. She gave up the Geneva Fellowship, an opportunity most scholars would sacrifice anything for, because her sister called and said she was needed." He looked at Megan, still frozen between worlds, then at Patricia, standing with the Wolfs. "She sacrificed everything for the people in this room, and this is how they repay her." The observation hung in the air, an indictment of everyone who had failed me. "I have heard enough accusations tonight," Lindberg said finally. "Now let me offer one of my own." His eyes locked on Alexander. "You, Mr. Wolf, are a bully, a petty, insecure man who tears others down because you cannot build yourself up. You thought you were exposing her tonight. Instead, you exposed yourself. Richard Wolff's face had gone from gray to purple during Lindbergh's speech. He had been watching his son's reputation and his company's future disintegrate in real time. When Lindbergh finished, Richard stepped forward, but not to support Alexander. His expression was that of a man watching everything he had built collapse into rubble. Lindbergh turned to address the room at large. I came here tonight prepared to finalize a $200 million investment in Wolff Capital's Nordic expansion. The number sent a ripple through the crowd. $200 million. The kind of money that changed companies, changed lives. That investment is now withdrawn. Alexander lunged forward. Henrik, wait. Let's discuss this privately. Whatever you want, whatever terms. Lindbergh raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Wolff. His voice was ice. I do not invest in companies led by men who humiliate women for sport. I do not partner with people who accuse innocent parties of crimes to cover their own embarrassment. And I certainly do not do business with anyone who treats the architect of our shared success as a servant. The words fell like hammer blows. The other Scandinavian delegates began to rise from their seats. One by one they moved toward the exit. A Swedish banker paused beside Lindbergh. We stand with Henrik. The Nordic consortium withdraws its interest. A Norwegian investor added his voice. Our firm as well. This behavior is unacceptable in any business context. The exodus was quiet but devastating. Hundreds of millions of dollars walking out the door. The future Alexander had been building evaporating before his eyes. You can't do this, Alexander said, his voice cracking. You need us. The American market. Lindbergh paused at the door. The American market has other partners, Mr. Wolff. Partners who understand that character matters more than capital. He nodded once, formally. Good evening. The Scandinavians filed out, leaving devastation in their wake. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded like a thunderclap. The moment the Europeans were gone, Richard Wolff turned on his son. You arrogant fool. His voice was low but savage, cutting through the stunned silence. Do you have any idea what you've done? Alexander seemed to shrink before his father's fury. Dad, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. You never research. You never prepare. You just assume you're the smartest person in every room you enter. He advanced on his son, finger jabbing. 200 million, gone. Because you couldn't control your ego for one evening. The Nordic expansion was our future, our legacy. And you threw it away to insult a woman who turned out to be the foundation of our entire Scandinavian operation. Father, please. Well, tonight you weren't the smartest person in the room. Richard's voice dropped to something cold and final. Tonight you weren't even close. He turned to the remaining guests, attempting damage control. I apologize for this spectacle. The Wolff family will be reviewing our internal processes. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. But the damage was done. Phones were out. People were texting, recording, documenting. By morning, this would be on every financial gossip site in Manhattan. The story of how Alexander Wolff destroyed a $200 million deal by insulting his future sister-in-law. Clarissa Wolff stood apart from her husband and son, watching the destruction with cold, calculating eyes. She did not move to comfort Alexander. She did not defend him. She was already calculating how to distance herself, how to preserve her social standing, how to emerge from this wreckage unscathed. Even his mother would not protect him now. Alexander stood alone in the center of the room. His father had turned against him. His mother had abandoned him. His investors had fled. His reputation was in tatters. He looked around for an ally and found none. Now he knew how I had felt 15 minutes ago. The difference was that I had not deserved it. I stood in the same spot I had occupied throughout the entire confrontation. The room had transformed around me. The hostile tribunal had become smoking ruin. I should have felt triumphant. I had been vindicated. My enemies were destroyed. Instead, I felt hollow. I looked at my mother, still standing with Clarissa Wolfe. Patricia would not meet my eyes. Shame? Fear? I could not tell anymore. I was not sure I cared. I looked at Megan, still frozen between worlds. My sister's face was wet with tears, but she had not moved toward me. Not even now, not even after everything. The victory was real, but so was the loss. I had proven my worth, and I had lost my family doing it. Victoria Chen appeared beside me, moving quietly through the thinning crowd. "That was quite a night," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Is it over?" "The immediate crisis, yes." She shrugged slightly. "The aftermath, that's just beginning." She pressed a card into my hand. "My direct line. You're going to need a lawyer who isn't afraid of the wolves." She disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. I looked at the card in my hand, then at the ruins of the party around me. I had come here invisible. I was leaving something else entirely. Vindicated? Victorious? Neither word felt right. I had come here for my sister. I was leaving without her. I had proven my worth. I had lost my family. Was that winning? A hand touched my arm. I turned, expecting another stranger, another business card, another complication. Instead, I found Megan. My sister stood before me, tear-streaked and trembling, but finally moving toward me instead of away. "Emily," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And for the first time all night, I did not know what to say. Megan stood before me, and for a moment I did not recognize her. The polished fiancé, the perfect accessory, the woman who had spent the entire evening performing a role she had been trained to play, was gone. In her place was my little sister, tear-streaked, trembling, makeup ruined, looking at me with eyes that held nothing but raw, desperate truth. "Emily," she whispered again, "I'm so sorry." I did not move immediately. Part of me wanted to embrace her, to forgive instantly, to pretend that the years of distance and the wounds of this evening could be erased with a single apology. But another part remembered. The bathroom where she had accused me of jealousy, the frozen silence when Alexander attacked me, the paralysis when I needed her most. "Sorry for what, Megan?" My voice was not cold, just careful. I needed to know which wound she was apologizing for. There were so many to choose from. Her hands twisted together, that nervous gesture I remembered from our childhood. "For everything. For tonight. For letting him treat you like that." She swallowed hard. "For 3 years ago. For calling you home. For not telling you why I really needed you." Something shifted in my chest. "What do you mean, really needed you?" Megan's eyes dropped to the floor. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I was already with Alexander then. We'd been together for 6 months." She took a shaky breath. "He was already controlling me, already isolating me from everyone who might see through him." I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't know how to escape. I was scared and alone, and I thought, if you came back, if I had someone on my side, maybe I could find a way out. Her voice cracked. "So I made the phone call. I told you Mom was dying when she just had pneumonia. I made you give up everything because I was too weak to face him alone." The truth landed like a physical blow. My fellowship, my career, my entire future. Sacrificed not for a family emergency, but for my sister's fear. She had been drowning, and she had pulled me under to keep herself afloat. I should have felt rage, betrayal, the kind of anger that burns everything it touches. Instead, I felt a terrible, devastating sadness. Megan had already been trapped when she called me. She had already been disappearing inside Alexander's control. And I had been the only lifeline she could reach for, even if grabbing it meant destroying me in the process. Before I could respond, Alexander's voice cut across the room. "Megan, what are you doing?" He was striding toward us, his face contorted with barely controlled fury. The defeat Lindbergh had dealt him had not broken him. It had only made him more dangerous. "Get away from her," he commanded. Now! His hand closed around Megan's arm, the grip tight enough that I could see her wince. That possessive grip I had noticed all evening, the one that left no room for resistance. She's poison, Megan. Can't you see what she's done? She's destroyed everything. Let go of me. Megan's voice was small, but it was there. Alexander, you're hurting me. I'm protecting you. His voice rose, cracking at the edges. From her, from all of them. They don't understand what I've built, what we've built together. What we've built. Something sparked in Megan's eyes. I don't even know who I am anymore. You've controlled every part of my life for 3 years. What I wear, who I talk to, what I'm allowed to say. I was helping you, Alexander insisted. Guiding you. You were nothing before me. Your family was drowning in debt. Your mother was about to lose everything. I saved you. You bought me. The words came out flat, final. You paid off debts, and then you owned us. All of us. Alexander's face twisted into something ugly. Bought you. I made you. His voice dropped to a hiss. Your dress? I paid for it. Your jewelry? I chose it. Your entire life? I created it. Without me, you're nothing. Your family is nothing. You'd still be selling flowers from a strip mall and begging creditors for more time. The mask had finally shattered completely. The charming billionaire, the sophisticated host, the cultured polyglot, all of it stripped away. What remained was a petulant, wounded child who could not stand being told no. The room watched in horrified silence. This was not the Alexander Wolf they knew. This was the monster he had always been, finally visible to everyone. My mother gasped from across the room. Even she, who had chosen money over her daughter, flinched at what Alexander had become. Something shifted in Megan's expression. The fear was still there, but something else rose above it. Recognition, clarity, the sudden, piercing understanding that comes when you finally see what has been in front of you all along. You're right, she said quietly. Alexander relaxed slightly, thinking he had won. You did pay for everything. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since they had met. But you know what you can't buy, Alexander? Her voice grew stronger with each word. You can't buy my sister's forgiveness, though God knows I don't deserve it. She pulled her arm from his grip with a sharp, sudden motion. He stumbled, caught off guard. You can't buy respect, not real respect, the kind that Henrik Lindbergh just walked out the door with. She straightened her spine, assuming a posture I had not seen from her all evening. The posture of a woman who had finally stopped being afraid. And you can't buy me, not anymore. She looked down at her hand, at the engagement ring that had been weighing on her finger all night. The massive diamond that had represented everything she thought she wanted, and everything she had been afraid to lose. Slowly, deliberately, she slid it off. I've been so scared, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Scared of losing the money, the status, the life I thought I wanted. She looked at me. But I've already lost something more important. I almost lost my sister. I almost lost myself. She held the ring out to Alexander. I don't want this anymore. I don't want any of it. Alexander stared at the ring like it was a snake. His hands were shaking. His face had gone a mottled purple. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice trembling. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you've given up. Megan set the ring on the nearest table with a soft click that somehow sounded like a door closing. No, she said. I won't. She turned her back on Alexander Wolf and walked to my side. She took my hand, her fingers cold and trembling but determined. We stood together. Sisters. For the first time in 3 years, we were on the same side. Alexander's face contorted into something inhuman. You think you can just walk away? His voice rose to a shout. After everything I've done for your pathetic family? He advanced on us, finger jabbing like a weapon. I will destroy you, both of you. The debts are still in your mother's name. I can call them in tomorrow. One phone call and she loses everything." His voice cracked with rage. "The flower shop? I own the building's lease. One signature and she's on the street." He turned his fury directly on me. "And you, the academic, the linguist. I will make sure no university, no institution, no one ever hires you again. I have lawyers, I have connections. I have more money than your entire family will see in 10 lifetimes." He was screaming now, all pretense of civility gone. "You think tonight was bad? This is nothing. I will make your lives a living hell." The remaining guests shifted uncomfortably. Some edged toward the exits. This was no longer a party, it was a breakdown, a man coming apart at the seams in front of everyone who mattered. I stepped forward, positioning myself slightly in front of Megan. My voice was quiet, steady, the calm at the eye of the storm. "Are you finished?" Alexander sputtered. "What?" "I asked if you're finished, because I'd like to respond." He stared at me, momentarily thrown by my composure. "You came here tonight with everything," I said. "Money, power, a beautiful fiancé, the respect of your peers, the most important deal of your career." I gestured at the ruins around us, the empty tables, the departed investors, his furious father, his calculating mother. "And now, look around you." My voice carried across the silent room. "Your deal is gone. $200 million walked out the door. Your reputation is destroyed. By morning, every financial gossip site in Manhattan will be running this story. Your family is ashamed of you. Your father just called you an arrogant fool in front of everyone, and your fiancé just gave back your ring." I met his eyes without flinching. "I didn't do that, Alexander. You did. Every bit of it." I let the words sink in. "You destroyed yourself. I just watched." Alexander's hand rose. Not quite a fist, but close. The room gasped. For one terrible moment, everyone believed he might actually strike me. I did not move. I did not flinch. I looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "Give them one more reason to remember who you really are." His hand trembled in the air between us. The moment stretched, elastic and dangerous. Then Richard Wolff's voice cut through the tension. "Alexander, enough." Richard strode forward, his face carved from stone. He did not look at his son with love or concern. He looked at him with disgust. "Security," Richard commanded. "Escort my son to the private lounge. He needs to calm down." Alexander wheeled on his father. "You're taking her side, after everything she's done?" "There are no sides left to take." Richard's voice was ice. "There's only damage control, and right now, you are the damage." 2 security guards approached Alexander, the same guards who had been ready to escort me out 15 minutes earlier, the same guards who had awaited his orders to remove me like a criminal. "Sir," one of them said, "please come with us." Alexander looked around wildly, searching for an ally, finding none. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cracking. "None of this is over." But the words had lost their power. He sounded like what he was, a beaten man making empty threats because he had nothing else left. The guards guided him toward the back rooms. He went, not quietly, but inevitably. The monster had been removed from his own party. The irony was not lost on anyone. Richard Wolff turned to the remaining guests. "I apologize for this evening's events. Please enjoy the refreshments. Cars will be called for anyone who wishes to leave." It was a dismissal disguised as hospitality. People began gathering their things, murmuring to each other. The engagement party was over. The engagement was over. Only wreckage remained. Clarissa Wolff approached my mother with calculated purpose. Her voice was crisp, businesslike. "Patricia, we need to discuss the financial arrangements, privately." My mother looked at Megan and me. For one moment I thought she might stay, might finally choose her daughters over her debts. Then she followed Clarissa toward the private rooms, like a woman walking to her own sentencing. I watched her go and felt something close to peace. She had made her choice. She would have to live with it. Megan squeezed my hand. Should we go after her? No. I turned to face my sister. This is between Mom and them now. Megan's face crumpled with guilt. I did this. I brought Alexander into our family. I let him do all of this. Stop. I gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet my eyes. You were a victim, too. We all were, in different ways. The only person responsible for Alexander's behavior is Alexander. How can you forgive me? Her voice broke. After what I did, calling you home, letting you sacrifice everything, standing there like a coward while he tried to destroy you? I considered the question honestly. The answer was not simple. I'm not sure I can. Not yet. Maybe not ever completely. Megan flinched. But I want to try. Because you're my sister. And tonight, when it mattered most, you chose me. I softened my grip on her shoulders. That has to count for something. Megan nodded, fresh tears falling. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I almost smiled. Let's start with getting out of here. I looked around at the ruined party, the empty tables, the abandoned champagne glasses, the scattered guests gathering their coats and their gossip. I think we've had enough of the Wolf family for one lifetime. We walked toward the exit together, sisters reunited in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration. My hand in hers, her hand in mine. The first steps of a long journey back to each other. Behind us, I heard Victoria Chen's voice. She was speaking into her phone, her words soft but clear. Yes, everything. I recorded everything. Audio and video. The threats, the accusations, the physical intimidation, all of it. A pause. Yes, I'll have it secured tonight. This is going to be very useful if he tries anything. I did not know what that meant yet, but I had a feeling that tonight's consequences were only beginning. The night air hit us as we stepped through the doors of the Sterling Club, cold and sharp and clean. It felt like waking up from a fever dream. Megan shivered beside me. What happens now? I did not have an answer. Everything was uncertain. The debts, the threats, the future that had seemed so impossible just hours ago. But standing in the Manhattan night with my sister beside me, I felt something I had not felt in 3 years. Hope. The Sterling Club looked different from the outside, smaller somehow, less imposing. Just a building with a brass number and a heavy door, not the fortress of wealth and cruelty it had seemed when I arrived hours ago. Megan and I stood on the sidewalk, the cold January air cutting through our inadequate dresses, watching our breath form clouds in the darkness. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. There was too much to say, and no way to say it all at once. I can't believe I almost married him, Megan whispered finally. I can't believe I almost let you. She looked at me, a ghost of a smile crossing her tear-streaked face. Since when could you stop me from doing anything? Fair point. You've always been the stubborn one. The exchange was light, fragile. The first tentative steps across a bridge we had burned years ago and were only now trying to rebuild. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A foundation we could build on, if we chose to. A town car pulled up to the curb, one of the party's arranged transportation services. The driver stepped out, professional and discreet. Ladies, can I take you somewhere? Megan looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us had anywhere particular to go. Her apartment was Alexander's apartment. My apartment was a tiny box in Brooklyn that suddenly seemed very far away. Just wait a moment, I said. We're expecting someone else. I did not know if that was true, but I was not ready to leave yet. Something felt unfinished. The door of the Sterling Club opened and my mother emerged. Patricia Carter looked like she had aged 10 years in the last hour. Her face was pale, her makeup destroyed, her carefully chosen dress wrinkled and disheveled. She moved slowly, each step weighted with something I could not immediately identify. Shame, perhaps. Or fear. She saw us standing by the car and stopped. For a moment I thought she might turn around and go back inside. Might choose the Wolfs one final time. Then her shoulders sagged, and she walked toward us. "Girls," she said. Her voice cracked on the single word. "What did Clarissa say?" I asked. My mother's laugh was hollow, humorless. "What do you think? The arrangement is over. The debts, they're calling them in." Megan's face went pale. "All of them?" Patricia nodded. "Alexander transferred the loans to a holding company last year. Clarissa says they'll demand full payment within 30 days. The number hung unspoken in the cold air. $200,000. Money none of us had. Money that had seemed manageable when it was spread across years of quiet payments, but that became impossible when demanded all at once. "This is my fault," Megan said, her voice breaking. "I should have left him sooner. I should have—" "No." My voice was firm. "This is not your fault. It's his. It's always been his." I looked at my mother. "And some of it, not all, but some, is yours, Mom." Patricia flinched but did not argue. She could not argue. The truth was too obvious to deny. "I was so scared," she whispered. "After your father died, everything fell apart. The bills, the shop, the house. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to feel safe again." Her voice cracked. "Alexander offered safety, or what looked like safety. I didn't look too closely at the price. I didn't want to see it." She looked at me, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I should have protected you, both of you. Instead, I chose money over my own daughters." The admission hung in the air. Ugly, true, necessary. I studied my mother, this woman who had made me invisible for 29 years, who had dismissed my achievements and celebrated my sisters, who had demanded I apologize for being attacked, who had stood with the Wolfs while I faced them alone. I could have raged at her, could have listed every wound, every dismissal, every moment of being less than. The ammunition was there, loaded and ready. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. And beneath it, buried deep but still present, love. The stubborn, complicated love that exists between parents and children even when it probably should not. "I'm not going to say it's okay," I said finally, "because it's not." Patricia nodded, accepting the judgment. "But I'm not going to abandon you either. We'll figure out the money, together, as a family, whatever that means now." Megan reached out and took Patricia's hand. Then she took mine. 3 women, connected for the first time in years. The circle was broken in places, but it was still a circle. We stood there in the cold, holding on to each other, and I felt something shift. Not healing, not yet. But the possibility of healing. The first fragile shoots of something that might, with time and care, grow into something real. "Okay," I said. "Let's figure this out." We climbed into the town car, the 3 of us crowded together on the back seat. The warmth was welcome after the January cold, and for a moment we just sat, letting the heat seep into our bones. I pulled out my phone and started making mental calculations. My savings, carefully hoarded from years of freelance translation work, amounted to maybe $15,000. Megan's finances were unknown to me, but I suspected Alexander had controlled every penny. "Meg, do you have anything saved? Anything he didn't know about?" Megan hesitated. "There might be something." Patricia looked up. "What do you mean?" "Before Alexander, before he started controlling everything, I had a small account. Money Grandma left me." Megan's voice was quiet, almost ashamed. "I never told him about it. It was my secret escape fund, in case I ever found the courage to leave." She looked at her hands. $42,000. I've never touched it. "That's a start," I said, "a real start." My mind was already working. "We can negotiate with the holding company, partial payment, a payment plan. They want money, not a lawsuit." Patricia shook her head. "They'll never agree to that." "They might. Victoria Chen recorded everything tonight. Alexander's threats, his behavior, the way he treated us. If they push too hard, we push back." I looked at both of them. Alexander can't afford more scandal, not after what happened tonight. By morning, every financial outlet in the city will be running this story. The last thing he needs is a public legal battle where all those recordings come out. For the first time, hope flickered in Patricia's eyes. You really think we have leverage? I think we have more than they want us to know. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, processing. Then Megan spoke. I can sell the jewelry, everything Alexander gave me. The necklace tonight, the earrings, all of it. It has to be worth something. Patricia straightened. And I'll put the shop on the market. It's time. I've been holding on to it for sentimental reasons, but sentiment doesn't pay bills. Mom, the shop is your life. Patricia's smile was sad but certain. No, you girls are my life. The shop is just a building. I forgot that for a while. The words were small reparations, insufficient to heal everything that had been broken between us. But they were sincere, and that mattered. A knock on the car window startled all of us. The driver rolled down the partition. Excuse me, Miss Carter, there's a gentleman asking for you, a Mr. Lindbergh. My heart stuttered. I looked through the window and saw Henrik Lindbergh standing on the sidewalk, his overcoat buttoned against the cold, his expression patient and unreadable. I'll be right back, I said to my mother and sister. I stepped out of the car and approached the man who had changed everything tonight. Miss Carter, Lindbergh's voice was warm despite the cold. I'm glad I caught you before you left. Mr. Lindbergh, I don't know how to thank you for what you did in there. You don't need to thank me, I simply told the truth. He studied me with those sharp, assessing eyes. What you did tonight took remarkable courage. Standing alone against that room, refusing to break even when everyone expected you to, that kind of strength is rare. I just told the truth, too. No. He shook his head slowly. You did far more than that. You stood alone against a room that wanted you to fall, and when you won, you chose grace over revenge. That combination, strength and mercy, is exceedingly rare and exceedingly valuable. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. I mentioned earlier that my foundation is opening a new division here in New York, the Nordic Cultural Institute. We'll be digitizing and translating medieval Scandinavian texts, making them accessible to scholars around the world. I nodded, remembering his words from earlier in the evening. It felt like a lifetime ago. We need a director of linguistic research, someone who understands the old languages and the modern applications, someone who can bridge centuries of evolution and explain why it matters. He held out the envelope. I would like that person to be you. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a formal offer letter on foundation letterhead, my name printed clearly at the top. My eyes found the salary line, and my breath caught. $175,000, full benefits, medical, dental, retirement matching, start date flexible whenever I was ready. I could barely breathe. There's something else, Lindbergh said. The Institute has a partnership with Uppsala University, full research privileges, access to archives, collaborative projects with the faculty there. He paused, letting the implications sink in. If you wish, you could complete your doctorate. We would support that entirely. I looked up from the letter, my eyes stinging. Why? My voice came out rough, unsteady. Why are you doing this for me? Lindbergh's expression softened. Because 3 years ago, the academic world lost one of its brightest minds. A young woman with extraordinary talent walked away from everything she had built, everything she had earned, because her family needed her. He met my eyes. Tonight, I have the opportunity to give her back, to give her the life she deserves. The life she earned. He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Consider it my investment in the future, and my apology on behalf of a world that let you slip away. I clutched the envelope like a lifeline. 3 hours ago, I had been invisible. Now I was holding the keys to everything I had ever wanted, everything I had thought I had lost forever. I don't know what to say. Say nothing tonight. His voice was gentle. Read the offer, think about it, talk to your family. He glanced toward the car where Megan and Patricia waited. This decision shouldn't be made in the aftermath of chaos. It should be made in the clarity of morning. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. One more thing, Lindbergh said. The path forward will not be simple. Mr. Wolf will attempt to cause trouble. Men like him always do when they've been humiliated. His expression hardened slightly. But I have some experience with difficult men, and I have resources they cannot match. If you need assistance, legal, financial, or otherwise, you have only to ask. He met my eyes with absolute seriousness. You are no longer alone in this. Do you understand? I nodded again. This time I found my voice. Thank you, Mr. Lindbergh, for everything. Henrik. He extended his hand and I shook it. Please, we are colleagues now, are we not? A small smile crossed my face. The first genuine smile of the entire evening. I suppose we are. Lindbergh nodded once, formally. Then he turned to walk away. He paused at the corner and looked back. Uppsala remembers Miss Carter, and now, so will the world. Then he was gone, disappearing into the Manhattan night, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with an envelope that contained my future. I stood there for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. The cold air, the distant sounds of the city, the weight of the paper in my hands. For 3 years, I had been surviving, paying bills, treading water, forgetting who I was, accepting that the life I had wanted was gone forever. Now, suddenly I remembered. I was Emily Carter, scholar, linguist, survivor. And my story was not over. It was just beginning. I walked back to the car and climbed inside. Megan and Patricia looked at me with curious, hopeful expressions. What was that about? Megan asked. I looked at the envelope in my hands, then at my family, broken, flawed, but still mine. I think, I said slowly, it was about starting over. The car pulled away from the Sterling Club. Behind us, the wreckage of an engagement party. Ahead of us, uncertainty, challenges, a mountain of debt. But somehow the future felt lighter than the past. No one spoke for several blocks. Then Patricia reached across and took my hand. I know I can't undo what I've done, the years I wasted, the things I said. Mom, let me finish. Her voice was steady, determined. I can't undo it. But I can do better. Starting now. Starting tonight. She squeezed my hand. You're not invisible, Emily. You never were. I was just too blind to see you. The words did not heal everything. They could not. But they were a start. The car crossed the bridge into Brooklyn. I looked back once, at the Manhattan skyline glittering in the darkness. Then I turned forward. Whatever came next, I would face it as myself. Not invisible, not silent, not afraid, just Emily. And that was enough. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. But this one was different from the warning I had received at the start of the evening. The recording is secure. Call me Monday. We have work to do. VC Victoria Chen, the lawyer who had watched everything, the ally I had not known I had. I showed the message to Megan, who showed it to Patricia. What does that mean? My mother asked. It means we're not alone, I said. It means Alexander can threaten all he wants, but we have evidence, we have leverage. We have people willing to fight with us. Megan leaned her head against my shoulder. The night is over, she said quietly. I looked out the window at the city lights streaming past. No, I said. The night is over. But the reckoning has just begun. 3 months later, the morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I sat at a mahogany desk in an office I still could not quite believe was mine, surrounded by bookshelves lined with medieval texts and the quiet hum of important work being done. On my desk, a nameplate I looked at every morning just to remind myself it was real. Dr. Emily Carter, Director of Linguistic Research. I was not technically a doctor yet. Henrik had insisted on the title anyway. You will earn it soon enough, he had said. Consider it an incentive. The office was modest by the standards of the Nordic Cultural Institute, but to me it felt like a palace. Cream-colored walls. A view of bare winter trees just beginning to show the first hints of spring. A desk large enough to spread out 14th-century manuscripts without worrying about coffee stains. Everything I had dreamed of during those years in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, translating technical documents for grocery money. I was reviewing a newly digitized letter from a Swedish countess, circa 1793, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Carter, your sister is here for lunch." I smiled. Tuesday lunches with Megan had become a ritual over the past 3 months. A standing appointment neither of us would miss for anything. "Send her in." Megan appeared in the doorway, and for a moment I just looked at her. She was different now. Not just her clothes, which were simpler, chosen by her own hand rather than dictated by someone else's taste. It was her posture, the way she moved, the light in her eyes that had been extinguished for so long. She looked like my sister again, the real one, the one I had missed for 3 years. "Ready?" she asked, grinning. "Starving. Let's go." We walked to a cafe near the Institute, our usual spot. The conversation flowed easily now, no longer weighted by guilt and secrets and years of distance. Megan told me about her new job, an administrative position at a nonprofit that helped survivors of domestic abuse. The irony was not lost on either of us. "My therapist says I'm making progress," she said, picking at her salad. "Learning to trust my own decisions again, learning to recognize when someone is trying to control me." "And how does that feel?" She considered the question. "Terrifying and wonderful, mostly wonderful." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We did that a lot now. Small gestures of connection, rebuilding what had been broken one touch at a time. "I still have nightmares sometimes," Megan admitted, "about him, about what I almost became, but they're getting less frequent. You got out, that's what matters." "We got out." She squeezed back. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then turned the screen toward me with an expression I could not quite read. A news alert. The headline made my breath catch. "Wolf Capital faces SEC investigation. Founder's son implicated in securities fraud." I took the phone and read the full article. The Securities and Exchange Commission had launched a formal investigation into Wolf Capital's Nordic dealings, allegations of insider trading, securities fraud, manipulation of investment protocols. At the center of it all, Alexander Wolf, whose aggressive acquisition strategies were now under intense scrutiny. The irony was not lost on me. The very protocols I had helped create, the language standards that made his contracts enforceable, were now being used as evidence against him. The foundation he had stood on was crumbling beneath his feet. "Multiple former employees have come forward with allegations," I read aloud. "The Nordic Investment Trust has filed a formal complaint citing fraudulent misrepresentation. 3 other European funds have joined." I scrolled further. "Alexander Wolf's assets have been frozen pending investigation. Richard Wolf has stepped down as chairman. Clarissa Wolf has reportedly filed for separation." The empire was collapsing. Everything Alexander had built, everything he had used to control and manipulate and destroy, was turning to ash. "Do you feel bad for him?" Megan asked quietly. "Even a little?" I considered the question honestly. I thought about the man who had called me a parasite, who had tried to humiliate me in front of 70 people, who had threatened to destroy my life and my family, who had controlled my sister so completely that she had forgotten how to be herself. "No," I said finally. "I feel bad for the person he could have been, but that person never existed. Maybe it never could have." Megan nodded slowly. "I used to think I could change him, that if I was perfect enough, obedient enough, he would become the man I wanted him to be." She looked out the window at the busy Manhattan street. "Now I know that was never possible. You can't love someone into being a good person. They have to choose that for themselves. And Alexander never chose anything but power. I handed the phone back to her. Enough about him. He's taken up enough of our lives. Megan put the phone away. You're right. I don't want to give him any more space in my head. We returned to our salads, our conversation, our rebuilt lives. Alexander Wolf was becoming what he had feared most: irrelevant. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Saw the news. Couldn't have happened to a nicer man. Dinner Sunday? I'm making your father's lasagna. I smiled. My mother was trying. That was all I could ask. Sunday dinner had become another ritual. Patricia's new apartment was smaller than the house she had lost, but it was hers. Paid for, honestly. No strings attached. I arrived early to help with the cooking. We worked side by side in the tiny kitchen, chopping and stirring and tasting, the kind of domestic scene I never thought I would have with my mother. Megan told me about her college acceptance, Patricia said, adding garlic to the sauce. I cried for an hour. Happy tears. The happiest. She paused, wooden spoon hovering over the pot. Both my girls finding their way. What more could a mother want? I did not answer immediately. The question contained too much history, too many years of feeling unseen and unvalued. But I was learning to let go of some of that weight. Carrying it was exhausting, and it did not change the past. I know I've said it before, Patricia continued, her voice careful, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, for all of it. For making you invisible, for choosing fear over you. Mom, let me finish. She set down the spoon and turned to face me. I can't undo those years, but I can make sure the ones ahead are different. I can see you now, Emily, really see you, and I'm so proud of who you've become. Her eyes were wet. You deserved better. You always did. I set down my own knife and hugged her. It was awkward at first. We were not a family that hugged easily, but then she relaxed into it and so did I. I know, Mom, I said into her shoulder. I know. We held each other for a long moment. Then the timer went off and we pulled apart, laughing, wiping our eyes, returning to the practical work of making dinner. The debts were paid now, not easily but completely. Megan's escape fund, the sale of the house and the shop, my first months of salary, and a settlement negotiated by Victoria Chen. Alexander's legal troubles had made the Wolf Holding Company eager to avoid additional complications. They had settled for 60 cents on the dollar and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The Carter family owed nothing to the Wolfs. Finally, truly free. After dinner, I stepped onto Patricia's small balcony. The city spread below, lights glittering, life humming, possibility everywhere. I held a glass of champagne, barely touched, and let my mind wander back to that night. The Sterling Club, the Swedish words, the silence before I spoke. I remembered Alexander's face when I answered him. The moment everything changed. The satisfaction of watching his assumptions crumble. But it was not the Swedish that had saved me, I realized now. It was not the Lindbergh Protocol or my credentials or my academic achievements. It was the decision to stop being invisible, to stop accepting less than I deserved, to stand up and speak even when the entire room expected me to stay silent. I had spent most of my life believing that if I was just quiet enough, helpful enough, invisible enough, people would eventually see my worth. I had believed that sacrifice and silence would earn me love and respect. I had been wrong. Silence had not earned me anything except more silence, more invisibility, more of the life I did not want. That night, I had chosen to speak, and speaking had changed everything. I understood now what I could not see before. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is strategy, sometimes it is survival. There are moments when staying quiet is the wisest choice, when the battle is not worth fighting, when patience serves better than confrontation. But there comes a moment when silence becomes complicity, with others' cruelty, with your own erasure, with a life half lived because you are too afraid to claim the whole thing. That night at the Sterling Club, I found that moment. I crossed that line. And I would never go back. The door opened behind me. Megan stepped onto the balcony, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Room for one more?" I smiled and made space beside me at the railing. She handed me a fresh glass, and we stood together, looking out at the city that had witnessed our worst night and our new beginning. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how far we've come, and how far we still get to go." She clinked her glass against mine. "To the journey, to the journey." We drank in comfortable silence. Then Patricia joined us, and the 3 of us stood together on that tiny balcony, a family reformed in the wreckage of what we had survived. "To new beginnings," Patricia said, raising her glass. "To second chances," Megan added. I completed the toast. "To family, the real kind, the kind that shows up." The champagne was cold and bright and full of promise. Later, as we were cleaning up the dinner dishes, Megan asked the question I had been asking myself for 3 months. "Any regrets?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. The years lost, the fellowship abandoned, the invisibility endured, the family that had failed me, and the family we were slowly becoming. "No," I said finally. "Everything that happened, even the painful parts, led me here. To this kitchen, to you, to who I am now." I smiled at my sister, at my mother, at the life I was building from the ashes of the one I had lost. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I dried my hands on a dish towel and looked out the window at the city lights. "Besides," I said, "if I hadn't gone through all of it, I wouldn't have such a good story to tell." And that is how a so-called invisible sister silenced a room full of billionaires without raising her voice. It is a reminder that true class is not about what you wear or what language you speak or how much money you have in the bank. True class is about how you treat people, especially when you think no one important is watching. Alexander Wolff learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the quiet one. She might just be waiting for the right moment to speak. And when she does, you had better be ready to listen. I did not win that night because I spoke Swedish. I won because I refused to be erased. Because I stood my ground when everyone expected me to crumble. Because I chose dignity over surrender and grace over revenge. Those are choices anyone can make. You do not need a PhD or a wealthy benefactor or a dramatic confrontation in a Manhattan ballroom. You just need to decide that you are worth fighting for, that your voice matters, that your silence is a choice, not a sentence. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been overlooked or underestimated or made to feel invisible, I would love to hear your experience. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? How have you found your voice when everyone expected you to stay silent? And if you enjoyed this journey, please hit the like button. It really helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a tale of justice served and dignity reclaimed. Because everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to be heard. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming the person they said you could never be. Until next time, stay strong, stay patient. And never forget, knowledge is power. But knowing when to use it? That is wisdom. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.